Chapter 1. Long ago, there was a piece of wood. It was not an expensive piece of wood, but just a regular log used for the fire. One day, the piece of wood ended up in the shop of an old carpenter. His name was Mastro Antonio, but everyone called him Mastro Cherry because the tip of his nose was round, red, and shiny like a cherry. When Mastro Cherry saw the piece of wood, he was very happy. He rubbed his hands together and said to himself, "This is just what I need. I will make a table leg from it." He took his hatchet to peel the bark off the wood, but just as he was about to hit it, he heard a tiny voice say, "Please be careful. Don't hit me so hard." Mastro Cherry was very surprised. He looked around the room to see who was talking, but no one was there. He looked under the bench, in the closet, and around the room, but there was no one. He even looked outside the door, but still no one was there. "Ah, I see," Mastro Cherry said, laughing. "I must have imagined it. I'll get back to work." He hit the wood again. Oh, that hurts," cried the same tiny voice. Mastro Cherry was shocked. He couldn't believe it. He looked at the piece of wood and wondered, could this piece of wood be able to cry like a child? He thought for a moment, then said, "It's just a regular log. But maybe there is someone hiding inside it. If so, I will deal with them." Mastro Cherry hit the wood hard and threw it around the room. He listened carefully for the voice, but there was nothing. He waited a long time, but still he heard nothing. "It looks like I was wrong," Mastro Cherry said, trying to laugh. "I must have imagined it again. Let's get back to work." Feeling a little scared, he tried to sing to make himself feel better. He took a plane to smooth the wood, but again he heard the tiny voice. This time it giggled and said, "Stop, ha, 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 you're tickling my stomach." Mastro Cherry was so surprised he fell down on the floor. When he stood up, his face was purple from fear, and his nose was no longer red, but very dark. Chapter 2. At that moment, there was a loud knock on the door. "Come in," said the carpenter, who was too tired to stand up. The door opened and a small old man entered. His name was Geppetto, but the children in the neighborhood called him Polendina because of his yellow corn-colored wig. Geppetto had a bad temper. If anyone called him Polendina, he became very angry and could not be calmed down. "Hello, Mastro Antonio," Geppetto said. "Why are you on the floor?" "I am teaching the ants their ABCs. Good luck with that." "What brings you here, Geppetto?" "My legs," Geppetto answered. "But I also came to ask for a favor." "I'm happy to help," said the carpenter, getting up on his knees. "I had a good idea this morning." "Tell me about it." "I want to make a beautiful wooden marionette. It should dance, fence, and do somersaults. I want to travel with it and earn money for food and drink. What do you think?" "Bravo, Polendina," said the tiny voice, but no one knew where it came from. When Geppetto heard himself called Polendina, he turned bright red and said angrily, "Why are you insulting me?" "I didn't insult you. You called me Polendina." "I didn't. I know it was you." "No." "Yes." "No." "Yes." They became angrier and started to argue. Soon they were scratching, biting, and slapping each other. When the fight ended, Mastro Antonio had Geppetto's yellow wig, and Geppetto had the carpenter's curly wig in his mouth. "Give me my wig back!" shouted Mastro Antonio. "Give me mine, and we'll be friends." The two old men put their wigs back on their heads, shook hands, and promised to be good friends forever. "Well then, Geppetto," said Mastro Antonio, wanting to be friendly, "what do you want?" "I want a piece of wood to make my marionette. Will you give it to me?" Mastro Antonio was happy and went to get the piece of wood. But when he tried to hand it to Geppetto, it slipped from his hands and hit Geppetto's thin legs. "Is this how you give gifts, Mastro Antonio? You almost made me lame." "I didn't mean to do it," It was obviously me. It's this piece of wood's fault. You're right, but remember you threw it at my legs. I didn't throw it. Liar! Don't insult me, Geppetto, or I'll call you Polendina. Idiot. Polendina! Donkey! Polendina! Ugly monkey! When Geppetto heard Polendina for the third time, he became so angry that he attacked the carpenter. They fought again, each giving the other a good thrashing. After the fight, Mastro Antonio had 2 scratches on his nose, and Geppetto had 2 buttons missing from his coat. They shook hands again and promised to be good friends forever. Geppetto then took the piece of wood, thanked Mastro Antonio, and limped home. Chapter 3. Geppetto's house was small but neat and comfortable. It had a little window under the stairs. The furniture was very simple, an old chair, a broken bed, and a wobbly table. There was a picture on the wall of a fireplace with a pot that looked like it was steaming. When Geppetto got home, he took his tools and started to make the marionette. What should I call him? He wondered. I'll call him Pinocchio. This name will bring him luck. I once knew a family of Pinocchios, and they were all lucky. After choosing the name, Geppetto started making the marionette's hair, forehead, and eyes. To his surprise, the eyes moved and stared at him. Geppetto felt insulted and said, "Ugly wooden eyes, why do you stare at me?" But the eyes didn't answer. Next, Geppetto made the nose. As soon as it was finished, the nose started to grow longer and longer, and no matter how much Geppetto cut it, it kept growing. He gave up trying to fix it. Then Geppetto made the mouth. As soon as it was finished, it began to laugh at him. "Stop laughing!" Geppetto shouted, but the mouth didn't stop. It stuck out its tongue. Geppetto decided to ignore it and continued working. He made the chin, neck, shoulders, arms, and hands. When he was almost finished, he felt his wig being pulled off. He looked up and saw Pinocchio holding his yellow wig. "Pinocchio, give me my wig," he said. Instead of giving it back, Pinocchio put the wig on his own head. Geppetto became very sad and said, "Pinocchio, you bad boy, you're not even finished, and you're already being rude to me. Very bad, my son." And he wiped away a tear. Geppetto then made the legs and feet. As soon as they were done, Pinocchio kicked Geppetto on the nose. "I deserve this," Geppetto said. "I should have thought about it before making him." He put Pinocchio on the floor to teach him to walk. Pinocchio's legs were stiff, so Geppetto helped him move one foot after the other. When Pinocchio could walk, he ran around the room and out the door. He jumped into the street and started running fast. Geppetto ran after him, but Pinocchio was too fast. He made a lot of noise with his wooden feet, like many people in wooden shoes. "Catch him! Catch him!" Geppetto shouted. The people in the street laughed when they saw the wooden marionette running. Finally, a carabinier, a policeman, saw Pinocchio running and thought he was a runaway horse. He stood in the street and tried to stop him. Pinocchio tried to escape, but the carabinier grabbed him by the nose and brought him back to Geppetto. Geppetto wanted to pull Pinocchio's ears, but when he looked, he realized he had forgotten to make them. So, he grabbed Pinocchio by the neck and took him home. On the way, Pinocchio threw himself on the ground and refused to move. People gathered around and said things like, "Poor marionette, Geppetto will beat him," and "Geppetto is cruel, he will hurt him." The carabinier decided to let Pinocchio go and took Geppetto to prison instead. Geppetto was upset and cried, saying, "Ungrateful boy, I worked so hard to make you a good marionette. I deserve this." What happened next is an unbelievable story, but you can read it in the next chapters. Chapter 4. It didn't take long for poor old Geppetto to be taken to prison. Meanwhile, Pinocchio, now free from the carabinier, was running wildly across fields and meadows, taking shortcuts on his way home. He jumped over bushes, brooks, and ponds, running fast like a goat or a rabbit being chased. When he reached home, he found the door half open. He slipped inside, locked the door, and threw himself on the floor, happy to be free. But his happiness didn't last long. Suddenly he heard a voice say, "Cree, cree, cree?" "Who's calling me?" Pinocchio asked, feeling scared. "I am," the voice answered. Pinocchio turned around and saw a big cricket crawling slowly up the wall. "Who are you, cricket?" he asked. "I am the talking cricket. I've lived in this room for over 100 years, said the cricket. "Today, this room is mine," Pinocchio said. "If you want to do me a favor, leave now and don't turn back." "I won't leave until I tell you something important," the cricket replied. "Tell it then, and hurry," said Pinocchio. "Boys who don't obey their parents and run away from home will never be happy. When they grow up, they will regret it," the cricket said. "Sing on, cricket, if you want," Pinocchio said. "But tomorrow, I'm leaving. I don't want to go to school like other kids. I want to chase butterflies, climb trees, and steal birds' nests." "You foolish boy! Don't you know that if you keep doing this, you'll grow up to be a donkey and everyone will laugh at you?" the cricket warned. "Be quiet, ugly cricket," Pinocchio shouted. But the cricket, who was wise, didn't get angry. Instead, he said, "If you don't want to go to school, why not learn a trade so you can earn money honestly?" Pinocchio, starting to get impatient, said, "I only want one job in life." "And what's that?" the cricket asked. "Eating, drinking, sleeping, playing, and wandering around all day long," said Pinocchio. The cricket replied calmly, "Those who do that always end up in the hospital or in prison." "Careful, cricket. If you make me angry, you'll be sorry," Pinocchio warned. "Poor Pinocchio, I feel sorry for you," said the cricket. "Why?" Pinocchio asked. "Because you're a marionette, and worse, you have a wooden head," said the cricket. At those words, Pinocchio jumped up in a rage, grabbed a hammer from the bench, and threw it at the cricket with all his strength. Pinocchio probably didn't think he would hit it, but sadly, dear children, he did. The hammer struck the cricket's head. With one last weak cree-cree-cree, the poor cricket fell to the ground, dead. Chapter 5. After the cricket's death, Pinocchio didn't feel scared for long. As night came, he suddenly felt a strange emptiness in his stomach. He realized he hadn't eaten anything yet. A boy's hunger grows quickly, and soon, the empty feeling turned into a strong hunger. Pinocchio became as hungry as a bear. Poor Pinocchio ran to the fireplace where the pot was boiling. He reached to take the cover off, but to his surprise, the pot was only a painting on the wall. His nose grew longer because he was so shocked. He searched the room, looking in all the boxes, drawers, and even under the bed, hoping to find some bread, a cookie, or maybe a bit of fish. Even a dog's bone would have tasted good. But he found nothing. His hunger kept getting worse. The only thing that helped was yawning, and Pinocchio yawned so big his mouth stretched to his ears. Soon he felt dizzy and faint. He cried and said to himself, "The talking cricket was right. It was wrong of me to disobey father and run away from home. If he were here now, I wouldn't be so hungry. Oh, how awful it is to be hungry." Suddenly, he saw something round and white in a corner. It looked like a hen's egg. He quickly grabbed it. It was an egg. Pinocchio was so happy he couldn't believe it. He kissed the egg and talked to it, saying, "How should I cook you? Should I make an omelet? No, it's better to fry you in a pan. You'll taste better fried." He quickly set a pan on a little stove filled with hot coals. Instead of oil or butter, he put some water in the pan. As the water started to boil, he cracked the egg. But instead of the egg white and yolk, a little yellow chick came out, smiling and fluffy. It bowed to Pinocchio and said, "Thank you, Mr. Pinocchio, for helping me break my shell. Goodbye, and good luck to you. Please say hello to your family." Then the chick spread its wings and flew out the open window into the sky, disappearing from sight. Pinocchio stood frozen, staring with wide eyes, holding the empty eggshells in his hands. When he finally came to his senses, he began to cry and shout, stamping his feet and saying, "The talking cricket was right. If I hadn't run away from home and if Father were here, I wouldn't be so hungry. Oh, how awful it is to be hungry." His stomach kept growling, and with nothing to eat, he decided to go to the nearby village to find someone kind enough to give him some bread. Chapter 6. Pinocchio didn't like the dark street, but he was so hungry that he ran out of the house anyway. The night was very dark. There was thunder and lightning lit up the sky, making it look like a sea of fire. The wind was strong and cold, blowing dust everywhere, and the trees shook and made strange noises. Pinocchio was very afraid of thunder and lightning, but his hunger was even stronger than his fear. He ran quickly to the village, tired and out of breath, with his tongue hanging out. The whole village was dark and empty. The stores were closed, and there were no lights in the windows or doors. There wasn't even a dog in the street. It looked like a ghost town. In desperation, Pinocchio ran to a house, rang the bell, and hoped someone would answer. He was right. An old man with a nightcap opened the window and looked down, angry. "What do you want at this hour?" he asked. "Could you please give me some bread? I'm very hungry," Pinocchio said. "Wait a moment, I'll be right back," the old man said, thinking Pinocchio was just one of those boys who ring bells at night for fun. After a minute, the old man shouted, "Get under the window and hold out your hat." Pinocchio didn't have a hat, but he stood under the window just in time to feel a cold shower of water fall on his head, shoulders, and body. He went home soaking wet and tired, hungry and weak. He had no strength left, so he sat on a little stool and put his feet on the stove to warm them. He fell asleep, and while he slept, his wooden feet started to burn. Slowly, they turned black and then to ashes. Pinocchio slept soundly, not feeling anything. When the sun came up, he woke up to a loud knock on the door. "Who is it?" he asked, yawning and rubbing his eyes. "It's me," answered a voice. It was the voice of Geppetto. Chapter 7. The poor marionette, still half asleep, didn't realize that his feet were burned and gone. When he heard his father's voice, he jumped up to open the door, but he stumbled and fell to the floor. When he fell, it was as loud as a bag of wood falling from the top floor of a house. "Open the door for me," Geppetto called from outside. "Father, dear father, I can't," answered Pinocchio, crying and rolling on the floor. "Why can't you?" Geppetto asked. "Because someone ate my feet," Pinocchio said. "And who ate them?" Geppetto asked. "The cat," Pinocchio answered, seeing the cat playing with some pieces of wood in the corner. "Open the door," Geppetto said, "or I'll give you a good whipping when I get in." "Father, believe me, I can't stand up. Oh no, I'll have to walk on my knees forever," Pinocchio cried. Geppetto thought Pinocchio was just playing, so he climbed up the side of the house and went in through the window. At first Geppetto was very angry, but when he saw Pinocchio lying on the floor with no feet, he felt very sad. He picked Pinocchio up, hugged him, and said with tears in his eyes, "My little Pinocchio, my dear little Pinocchio, how did you burn your feet?" "I don't know, father," Pinocchio said, "but last night was terrible. There was thunder and lightning, and I was so hungry. The talking cricket told me I deserved it because I was bad. I got angry and killed the cricket with a hammer. Then I made the pan hot, but the little chick came out of the egg and flew away, saying, 'Goodbye and remember me to your family.' I was still hungry, so I went out and the old man with the nightcap threw water on me. I came home and put my feet on the stove to dry them, and I fell asleep. Now my feet are gone, but I'm still hungry." "Oh! Oh!" Pinocchio cried loudly. Geppetto, not understanding everything Pinocchio said, only knew that Pinocchio was hungry. He took 3 pears out of his pocket and gave them to Pinocchio, saying, "These pears were for my breakfast, but I will give them to you. Eat them and stop crying." "If you want me to eat them, please peel them for me," Pinocchio said. "Peel them?" Geppetto said, surprised. "I didn't think you were so picky about your food. Bad, very bad. We should eat anything, because we never know what life will bring us." "You may be right," Pinocchio said, "but I won't eat them if they aren't peeled. I don't like them." So Geppetto took out a knife, peeled the pears, and put the skins on the table. Pinocchio ate 1 pear quickly and was about to throw away the core, but Geppetto stopped him. "No, don't throw it away. Everything in this world may be useful." "But I won't eat the core," Pinocchio said angrily. "Who knows?" Geppetto said calmly. Later, the 3 cores were placed on the table next to the skins. Pinocchio ate the 3 pears very quickly. Then he yawned and said, "I'm still hungry." "But I don't have any more to give you," Geppetto said. "Really? Nothing else?" Pinocchio asked. "I only have these 3 cores and the skins," Geppetto said. "Well, if there's nothing else, I'll eat them," Pinocchio said. At first he made a face, but then he ate all the skins and cores. "Ah, now I feel fine," Pinocchio said after eating everything. "You see," Geppetto said, "I was right when I told you that you shouldn't be too picky about food. We never know what life will bring us." Chapter 8. Once Pinocchio's hunger was satisfied, he started complaining and crying because he wanted a new pair of feet. But Geppetto, to punish him for his mischief, didn't say anything to him all morning. After lunch, he spoke to Pinocchio. "Why should I make your feet again? So you can run away from home again?" "I promise, father," said Pinocchio, crying. "I will be good from now on." "Boys always promise that when they want something," said Geppetto. "I promise to go to school every day, study, and do well," Pinocchio said. "Boys always say that when they want their way," replied Geppetto. "But I'm not like other boys. I'm better than them, and I always tell the truth. I promise, father. I'll learn a job and be a help to you when you're old," Pinocchio said. Geppetto, though trying to look serious, couldn't help but feel his eyes fill with tears and his heart soften when he saw Pinocchio so sad. He said no more, but he took his tools and 2 pieces of wood and started working. In less than an hour, the feet were ready. 2 small, strong feet, made as if by an artist. "Close your eyes and sleep," Geppetto told Pinocchio. Pinocchio closed his eyes and pretended to sleep while Geppetto carefully glued the new feet onto him. The feet were so well made that you could hardly see the place where they were attached. As soon as Pinocchio felt his new feet, he jumped up from the table and started skipping around, so happy he almost lost his head with joy. "To show you how grateful I am, father, I'll go to school now. But to go to school, I need clothes." Geppetto didn't have any money, so he made Pinocchio a suit from flowered paper, shoes from tree bark, and a little cap from dough. Pinocchio ran to look at himself in a bowl of water and said proudly, "Now I look like a gentleman." "True," said Geppetto, "but remember, fine clothes don't make a man unless they are clean and neat." "That's true," Pinocchio agreed. "But to go to school, I still need something important." "What's that?" "An ABC book." "Oh yes, but how will we get one?" "We'll go to a bookstore and buy one." "And the money?" "I don't have any," said Pinocchio. "Neither do I," said Geppetto sadly. Pinocchio, who was always a happy boy, became sad when he heard this. When there is no money, even naughty boys understand. "What does it matter?" Geppetto suddenly said, jumping up from his chair. He put on his old coat, full of patches, and ran out of the house. After a while he came back. In his hands he held the ABC book for Pinocchio, but the coat was gone. The poor man was in his shirt sleeves, and the day was cold. "Where's your coat, father?" Pinocchio asked. "I sold it," Geppetto said. "Why did you sell your coat?" Pinocchio asked. "It was too warm," Geppetto answered. Pinocchio understood right away. He couldn't stop his tears and hugged his father, kissing him over and over again. Chapter 9. Look at Pinocchio running to school with his new ABC book under his arm. As he walked, he thought about many exciting things he wanted to do. He said to himself, "Today I'll learn to read, tomorrow I'll learn to write, and the day after tomorrow I'll do math. Then I'll be smart and earn a lot of money. With the first money I make, I'll buy father a new coat. Not just any coat, but one made of gold and silver with diamond buttons. He deserves it for buying me this book. He gave up his coat on such a cold day. Fathers are so kind to their children." While he was talking to himself, he heard music in the distance, pipes and drums. Pee-pee-pee-pee-pee-pee, zum, 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 zum. Pinocchio stopped and listened. The music came from a small street leading to a village by the shore. "What is that noise? I wish I didn't have to go to school. I could—" He stopped, thinking. Should he go to school or follow the music? "Today I'll follow the music, and tomorrow I'll go to school. There's always time for school," he decided, shrugging his shoulders. He ran down the street, faster and faster, with the sound of pipes and drums growing louder. Peep, 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 peep. Zum, 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 zum. Suddenly, he found himself in a large square full of people. In front of him was a little wooden building, painted in bright colors. "What is that building?" Pinocchio asked a boy nearby. "Read the sign and you'll know." "I want to read it, but I can't today." "Oh, I'll read it for you. It says, Great Marionette Theater in big letters." "When does the show start?" "It's starting right now." "How much does it cost to get in?" 4 pennies. Pinocchio, curious to see what was inside, forgot all his pride and asked the boy, "Can you lend me 4 pennies until tomorrow?" "I would, but I can't right now," the boy said, teasing him. "For 4 pennies I'll sell you my coat." "If it rains, what will I do with a coat made of paper flowers? I can't take it off." "Do you want to buy my shoes?" "They are only good for lighting a fire." "What about my hat?" "Not a good deal. A dough cap? The mice will eat it." Pinocchio was almost in tears. He wanted to offer something else, but didn't have the courage. He hesitated, not knowing what to do. Finally, he said, "Will you give me 4 pennies for the book?" "I don't buy from boys," said the other boy, being much smarter than Pinocchio. "I'll buy your ABC book for 4 pennies, said a ragpicker nearby. Right then, the book changed hands. And think, poor Geppetto was at home, shivering in his shirt sleeves, having sold his coat to buy that very book for his son. Chapter 10. Quick as a flash, Pinocchio ran into the marionette theater. Something happened then that almost caused a big problem. The curtain went up, and the play started. Harlequin and Pulcinella were on stage, pretending to fight with sticks. The audience laughed and enjoyed the show. The play went on for a few minutes, and then suddenly Harlequin stopped. He turned to the audience and shouted, "Look, look! Am I dreaming, or do I really see Pinocchio there?" "Yes, yes, it's Pinocchio!" yelled Pulcinella. "It's Pinocchio! It's really him!" shouted Signora Rosaura, peeking out from the side of the stage. All the marionettes started shouting, "It's Pinocchio! Our brother Pinocchio! Hooray for Pinocchio!" "Pinocchio, come up here!" shouted Harlequin. "Come to the arms of your wooden brothers!" Pinocchio jumped from the back of the orchestra to the front rows. He jumped again and landed on the orchestra leader's head. With another leap, he was on the stage. The marionettes cheered and hugged him, shouting and laughing. They were so happy to see him. But the audience wasn't happy. They saw the play had stopped, and they started yelling, the play, we want the play." But the marionettes didn't listen. Instead of going back to the show, they made even more noise and picked Pinocchio up on their shoulders, carrying him around the stage in celebration. Just then, the director came out. He looked so scary that everyone was afraid. His beard was black and very long, reaching down to his feet. His mouth was huge, and his teeth were yellow. His eyes glowed red. He held a long whip made of snakes and cats' tails, and it swished through the air. When the director appeared, no one moved. The marionettes were scared, shaking like leaves in the wind. "Why did you cause such a mess in my theater?" the director asked Pinocchio in a deep, scary voice. "Please, Your Honor, it wasn't my fault," Pinocchio said. "Enough, be quiet, I'll deal with you later." When the play ended, the director went to the kitchen, where a big lamb was cooking on a spit. It needed more wood to finish cooking. He called Harlequin and Pulcinella and said, "Bring me that marionette. He looks like good wood. He'll make a great fire for the spit." Harlequin and Pulcinella were scared, but obeyed. A few minutes later, they came back with Pinocchio, who was crying and struggling. "Father, save me! I don't want to die! I don't want to die!" Pinocchio cried. Chapter 11. In the theater, there was a lot of excitement. Fire Eater, this was his name, was very ugly, but he wasn't as bad as he looked. When he saw Pinocchio, who was crying and saying, "I don't want to die! I don't want to die!" he felt sorry for him. First, he hesitated, and then he began to feel kind. Finally, he couldn't hold it in anymore and sneezed loudly. When Harlequin saw this, he smiled and whispered to Pinocchio, "Good news, brother! Fire Eater has sneezed, and that means he feels sorry for you. You are saved!" It said that when Fire Eater felt sad, he sneezed instead of crying, which showed he had a kind heart. After sneezing, Fire Eater, still looking very scary, shouted at Pinocchio, "Stop crying! Your wails make me feel funny in my stomach. Achoo! Achoo!" 2 loud sneezes followed. "God bless you," Pinocchio said. "Thanks. Are your father and mother still alive?" Fire Eater asked. "My father is alive, but I've never known my mother," Pinocchio answered. "Your poor father would suffer if I used you as firewood. I feel sorry for him. Achoo! Achoo! Achoo!" Fire Eater sneezed 3 times, even louder than before. "God bless you," Pinocchio said. "Thanks, but I should feel sorry for myself too. My dinner is ruined. I don't have enough wood for the fire, and the lamb is only half cooked. Never mind. I'll burn another marionette instead. Hey, officers!" At his call, 2 wooden officers appeared, thin and tall, with strange hats and swords. Fire Eater yelled at them, "Take Harlequin, tie him up, and throw him on the fire. I want my lamb cooked well." Harlequin was so scared that his legs gave way, and he fell to the floor. Seeing this, Pinocchio ran to Fire Eater and crying begged, "Please, have pity, sir." "There are no sirs here," Fire Eater answered coldly. "Please, Your Excellency," Pinocchio begged again. When Fire Eater heard himself called Your Excellency, he sat up straight, stroked his long beard, and smiled, becoming kind. "Well, what do you want from me, Marionette?" Fire Eater asked. "I beg you to forgive my friend Harlequin. He's never hurt anyone," Pinocchio said. "There is no mercy here, Pinocchio. I've spared you. Harlequin must burn instead. I'm hungry and my dinner must be cooked," Fire Eater said. "In that case," Pinocchio said proudly, "I'll take my place. Tie me up and throw me on the fire. It's not fair for Harlequin, my best friend, to die for me." These brave words made all the marionettes cry. Even the wooden officers cried like babies. At first, Fire Eater stayed cold as ice, but then, little by little, he softened and began sneezing again. After several sneezes, he opened his arms and said, "You are a brave boy. Come to me and kiss me." Pinocchio ran to him and kissed Fire Eater on the tip of his nose. Am I forgiven? Harlequin asked in a soft voice. Yes, you are forgiven, Fire Eater said. But next time, be careful, marionettes. Now, I'll have to eat my lamb only half-cooked. When the marionettes heard they were forgiven, they ran to the stage, turned on the lights, and danced and sang until dawn. Chapter 12. The next day, Fire Eater called Pinocchio aside and asked him, "What is your father's name?" "Geppetto." "And what does he do?" "He's a wood carver." "Does he earn much?" "He earns so little that he never has any money. For example, to buy me an ABC book for school, he had to sell the only coat he had, and it was full of holes and patches. Poor man. I feel sorry for him. Here, take these 5 gold coins. Go give them to him with my best wishes." Pinocchio was so happy. He thanked Fire Eater many times. He kissed each marionette, even the officers, and hurried home with joy. He had gone only a little way when he met a lame fox and a blind cat, walking together like good friends. The fox leaned on the cat, and the cat let the fox lead him. "Good morning, Pinocchio," said the fox. "How do you know my name?" asked Pinocchio. "I know your father," said the fox. "Where did you see him?" "I saw him yesterday, standing at his door." "And what was he doing?" "He was in his shirt sleeves, shaking from the cold." "Poor father. But after today, God willing, he won't suffer any more." "Why?" asked the fox. "Because I have become rich," Pinocchio said proudly. "You rich?" said the fox, laughing. The cat laughed too, but tried to hide it by stroking his whiskers. "There's nothing to laugh at," Pinocchio said angrily. "I have 5 new gold coins." Pinocchio pulled out the gold coins Fire Eater had given him. When the fox saw the gold, he forgot to act lame and held out his paw. The cat opened his eyes wide, like glowing coals, but quickly closed them again so Pinocchio didn't notice. "And what will you do with all that money?" asked the fox. "First, I'll buy a beautiful new coat for my father, made of gold and silver with diamond buttons. After that, I'll buy an ABC book for myself." "For yourself?" asked the fox. "Yes, for myself. I want to go to school and study." "Look at me," said the fox. "Because I wanted to study, I lost one of my paws." "Look at me," said the cat. "Because I wanted to study, I lost my sight." Just then, a blackbird sitting on the fence said loudly, "Pinocchio, don't listen to bad advice. You will regret it." Poor blackbird, if only he had stayed quiet. The cat quickly jumped on the bird, ate it all, and then cleaned his whiskers, closing his eyes and pretending to be blind again. "Why did you kill him?" Pinocchio asked the cat. "I killed him to teach him a lesson. He talks too much. Next time, he will keep quiet." The fox then asked, "Do you want to double your gold coins?" "What do you mean?" Pinocchio asked. "Do you want 100, 1,000, or even 2,000 gold coins for your 5? said the fox. "Yes, but how?" Pinocchio asked. "It's easy. Instead of going home, come with us." "And where will you take me?" "To the city of Simple Simons." Pinocchio thought for a moment, then said, "No, I want to go home. My father is waiting for me. I've been a bad son. The talking cricket was right when he said a disobedient boy can't be happy. I've learned this myself." "Well then," said the fox, "if you really want to go home, go ahead, but you'll be sorry." "You'll be sorry," the cat repeated. "Think about it, Pinocchio. You're turning your back on good luck." "You're turning your back on good luck," the cat repeated. "Tomorrow, your 5 gold coins will be 2,000, said the fox. 2,000, the cat repeated. "But how can they become so many?" Pinocchio asked, amazed. "I'll explain," said the fox. "Just outside the city of Simple Simons is a special field called the Field of Wonders. You dig a hole in the field and bury 1 gold coin. Then you cover it up, water it, and sprinkle some salt on it. The next morning, a tree will grow, full of gold coins. So if I bury my 5 gold coins, Pinocchio said, the next morning I will find… how many? It's easy to figure out, the fox said. Each coin will give you 500. Multiply 500 by 5, and you'll have 2,500 gold coins. Great! Great! Cried Pinocchio, jumping with joy. And when I have them, I'll keep 2,000 for myself, and I'll give the other 500 to you. A gift for us? Said the fox, pretending to be shocked. No, no, of course not. Of course not, said the cat. We don't work for money, said the fox. We only help others. To help others, said the cat. What kind people, thought Pinocchio to himself. And forgetting his father, the new coat, and the ABC book, he said, Let's go, I'm with you. Chapter 13. Cat, Fox, and Pinocchio walked and walked for a long time. Finally, in the evening, they were very tired and arrived at the Inn of the Red Lobster. Let's stop here for a while, said the fox. We can eat and rest for a few hours. At midnight we'll leave because we need to be at the Field of Wonders at dawn tomorrow. They went into the inn and sat at a table. None of them were very hungry. The cat was very weak. He ate only 35 fish with tomato sauce and 4 servings of tripe with cheese. He needed more food, so he ate 4 more helpings of butter and cheese. The fox, after much encouragement, tried to eat. The doctor had put him on a diet, so he ate a little. Some hare with chickens, partridges, pheasants, rabbits, frogs, and lizards. But he felt sick and couldn't eat more. Pinocchio ate the least. He only asked for some bread and a few nuts, but he didn't eat much. He was too excited thinking about the Field of Wonders and feeling full of thoughts about gold coins. After dinner, the fox said to the innkeeper, Give us 2 good rooms, one for Mr. Pinocchio and one for me and my friend. We'll take a short nap before we continue our journey. Wake us up at midnight, please. Yes, sir, the innkeeper replied, winking at the fox and the cat, as if saying, I understand. Pinocchio went to bed, fell fast asleep, and began to dream. He dreamed he was in a field with vines full of grapes. But the grapes were gold coins, sparkling and making a sound as they swayed in the wind. They seemed to say, Take us if you want us. Just as Pinocchio reached out to take some, 3 loud knocks woke him up. It was the innkeeper telling him it was midnight. Are my friends ready? Pinocchio asked. Yes, they left 2 hours ago, the innkeeper said. Why so soon? The cat got a message that his child was sick and in trouble. He had to leave quickly and didn't even say goodbye. Did they pay for dinner? No, they didn't. They didn't want to offend you, so they left the bill for you to pay, the innkeeper said. That's too bad. I would have liked to pay it, said Pinocchio, scratching his head. Where did they say they would wait for me? He asked. At the Field of Wonders at sunrise tomorrow. Pinocchio paid for the dinner and began his walk to the Field of Wonders, where he hoped to become rich. It was very dark, and he couldn't see anything. Not a leaf moved. A few bats flew by and scared him. He shouted, Who's there? And the hills echoed back, Who's there? Who's there? As he walked, Pinocchio saw a tiny glowing insect on a tree. The light was soft and pale. Who are you? Pinocchio asked. I am the ghost of the talking cricket, the insect replied in a faint voice, like it came from far away. What do you want? Pinocchio asked. I want to give you some advice. Go home and give your 4 gold coins to your poor father. He's crying because he hasn't seen you for so long. Tomorrow my father will be rich because these 4 gold coins will turn into 2,000. Don't listen to those who promise quick riches. They are either fools or cheaters. Go home to your father. But I want to go on, Pinocchio said. The night is late, the cricket warned. I want to go on. The road is very dark, the cricket said. I want to go on. It's dangerous, the cricket warned. I want to go on. Remember, boys who always want their way end up in trouble. That's nonsense. Goodbye, Cricket. Good night, Pinocchio, and may heaven protect you from harm. There was silence for a moment, and then the light from the cricket went out, as if someone had blown it out. The road was dark again. Chapter 14. Dear, oh dear, when I think about it, said Pinocchio to himself as he continued on his journey. Boys are really unlucky. Everyone gives us advice and warns us, and everyone wants to be like a father or mother to us, even the talking cricket. Take me, for example. I didn't listen to that cricket, and now who knows what bad things will happen to me. Assassins, really? I don't believe in them. I think they're just a story to scare children who want to run away. If I meet them, I'll just say, "What do you want? Don't try to fool me." I can almost see them running away, and if they don't, I can always run away myself. Pinocchio didn't have time to say more because he thought he heard a sound behind him. He turned around and saw two big black shadows dressed in black sacks. They moved quietly toward him like ghosts. They're here, Pinocchio thought. He didn't know where to hide his gold coins, so he put them under his tongue. He tried to run away, but before he could move, two strong hands grabbed him. Pinocchio heard two deep voices say, "Your money or your life." Pinocchio couldn't speak because of the coins in his mouth, so he tried to show with his head and body that he was just a poor marionette with no money. The thieves didn't listen. "Stop with the nonsense! Give us your money!" they shouted. Pinocchio kept shaking his head to say, "I have no money." "Give us the money or we'll kill you," said one of the thieves. "Kill you," repeated the other. "And after we kill you, we'll kill your father too." "Your father too," the second thief said. "No, not my father!" Pinocchio screamed in fear, but as he shouted, the gold coins tinkled in his mouth. "So you have the gold under your tongue. Give it to us," one of the thieves shouted. Pinocchio stayed quiet. "Are you deaf?" said the thief. "We'll get it from you." One thief grabbed Pinocchio's nose, and the other grabbed his chin. They pulled his mouth open, but Pinocchio's lips stayed shut. Finally, the smaller thief pulled out a knife and tried to force open Pinocchio's mouth with it. In a flash, Pinocchio bit down hard on the thief's hand, biting it off and spitting it out. To his surprise, it wasn't a hand. It was a cat's paw. Feeling brave, Pinocchio broke free from the thieves and jumped over the bushes, running quickly across the fields. The thieves chased him like two dogs chasing a rabbit. After running for 7 miles, Pinocchio was tired. He climbed a big pine tree to rest and see where the thieves were. The thieves tried to climb the tree too, but slipped and fell. Instead of giving up, the thieves got some wood, piled it up at the tree's base, and set it on fire. Soon the tree began to burn like a candle. Pinocchio saw the flames rising. Not wanting to be roasted, he jumped down and ran off with the thieves chasing him. As dawn broke, Pinocchio came to a deep pool of muddy water. What could he do? With a 1, 2, 3, he jumped across the pool. The thieves tried to jump too, but they didn't measure it right and fell right into the water. Pinocchio heard the splash and laughed, still running. "Enjoy the bath, gentlemen." He thought they must be drowned, but when he looked back, the two thieves were still following him, their black sacks dripping with water. Chapter 15. As Pinocchio ran, he started to feel like he would have to give up and let the thieves catch him. Suddenly, he saw a small white cottage shining like snow among the trees in the forest. "If I can just reach that house, I might be saved," he thought. Without wasting any time, he ran toward the house, with the thieves still chasing him. After running for almost an hour, Pinocchio, tired and out of breath, reached the door of the cottage and knocked. No one answered. He knocked harder, hearing the thieves getting closer. Again, there was silence. Feeling desperate, Pinocchio started kicking the door, trying to break it down. A window opened, and a beautiful girl appeared. She had blue hair, a pale face, and her eyes were closed with her hands crossed on her chest. She spoke in a soft, weak voice that was hard to hear. "No one lives here. Everyone is dead." "Won't you open the door for me?" Pinocchio cried. "I am dead too," she said. "Dead? But why are you at the window then?" "I'm waiting for the coffin to take me away." After saying this, the girl disappeared, and the window closed quietly. "Oh, beautiful girl with blue hair," Pinocchio cried. "Please open the door. Take pity on a poor boy who is being chased by two thieves." But before he could finish, two strong hands grabbed him by the neck, and the two thieves growled, "Now we've got you." Pinocchio, seeing death so close, trembled so much that his legs shook and the gold coins in his mouth made a noise. "Will you open your mouth now or not?" asked the thieves. "You're still not answering? We'll make you open it." They took out two sharp knives and struck him on the back. Luckily, Pinocchio was made of very hard wood, and the knives broke into pieces. The thieves stared at each other in surprise, holding the broken knives. "I know what to do now," one thief said. "We'll hang him." "Yes, hang him," said the other. They tied Pinocchio's hands behind his back, put a rope around his neck, and threw it over a tall oak tree. They pulled the rope until Pinocchio was hanging far up in the air. Satisfied with their work, the thieves sat on the grass, waiting for Pinocchio to die. But after 3 hours, Pinocchio's eyes were still open, his mouth still closed, and his legs still kicked harder than ever. Tired of waiting, the thieves shouted at him mockingly, "Goodbye. We hope when we come back tomorrow, you'll be dead and your mouth wide open." They left. A few minutes later, a strong wind started blowing. The poor marionette was blown back and forth like a bell's hammer. The movement made him feel sick, and the rope around his neck got tighter and tighter, choking him. Slowly, his eyes started to close. Death was getting closer, but Pinocchio still hoped someone would come to help him. But no one came. As he was about to die, he thought of his poor father, and barely able to speak, he whispered, "Oh, Father, dear Father, if you were here." These were his last words. His eyes closed, his mouth opened, his legs stretched out, and he hung there as if he were dead. Chapter 16. If Pinocchio had stayed hanging there much longer, he would have surely died. But luckily, the lovely maiden with azure hair saw him and felt pity for him. She looked out of the window and saw the marionette swinging in the wind. She clapped her hands 3 times. At the sound, a big falcon flew to the window. "What do you want, my kind fairy?" the falcon asked, bowing his head. It must be known that the lovely maiden with azure hair was a kind fairy who had lived for more than 1,000 years in the forest. "Do you see the marionette hanging from the tree?" the fairy asked. "Yes, I see him." "Fly to him right away. With your strong beak, untie the knot that holds him, take him down, and lay him gently on the ground." The falcon flew away and soon returned, saying, "I did what you asked." "How is he? Is he alive or dead?" the fairy asked. "At first I thought he was dead," said the falcon. "But when I loosened the knot, he sighed deeply and whispered, 'Now I feel better.'" The fairy clapped her hands twice, and a beautiful poodle appeared. He walked on his back legs like a man, wearing fine clothes, including a gold-trimmed tricorn hat, a velvet coat, and silver-buckled slippers. His tail was covered in blue silk to protect it from the rain. "Come, Medoro," the fairy said. "Get my best coach ready and head toward the forest. When you reach the oak tree, you will find a poor marionette on the ground. Lift him gently and bring him here." The poodle wagged his silk-covered tail and set off quickly. A little while later, a glass coach appeared, pulled by 100 pairs of white mice. The poodle sat at the front, snapping his whip and driving the coach like a real coachman. In a short time, the coach returned. The fairy was waiting and took the poor marionette in her arms. She brought him inside, put him in a soft bed, and sent for the best doctors in the area. One by one, the doctors arrived, a crow, an owl, and the talking cricket. "I would like to know, gentlemen," the fairy said to the doctors, "if this marionette is alive or dead." The crow stepped forward, feeling Pinocchio's pulse, nose, and toe. Then he said seriously, "To me, this marionette seems dead. But if he's not dead, then that means he's alive." The owl, who didn't agree, said, "I'm sorry, but I think he's alive. If he's not, then that means he's dead." The fairy asked the talking cricket for his opinion. "A wise doctor who doesn't know the answer should keep quiet," said the cricket. "But I know this marionette well. He's a rascal." Pinocchio, who had been quiet until then, suddenly shivered, and the bed shook. "The marionette," the cricket continued, "is rude, lazy, and a runaway." Pinocchio hid his face under the covers. "He's a disobedient son who is breaking his father's heart." Pinocchio started crying and sobbing. Everyone was surprised when they lifted the covers and saw that he was crying so much, he looked like he was melting. "The dead don't cry," said the crow. "When they do, it means they are starting to come back to life." "I don't agree with my friend," said the owl. "I think when the dead cry, it means they don't want to die." Chapter 17. After the doctors left, the fairy went to Pinocchio's bed. She touched his forehead and noticed he had a fever. She took a glass of water, added a white powder, and handed it to him, saying kindly, "Drink this, and in a few days you'll feel better." Pinocchio looked at the glass, made a face, and asked in a whiny voice, "Is it sweet or bitter?" "It's bitter, but it's good for you." "If it's bitter, I don't want it." "Drink it." "I don't like bitter things." "Drink it, and I'll give you a lump of sugar to make it taste better." "Where's the sugar?" The fairy took out a piece of sugar from a golden bowl. "I want the sugar first, then I'll drink the water." "Do you promise?" "Yes." The fairy gave him the sugar. Pinocchio chewed it quickly and said, "If only sugar were medicine, I'd take it every day." "Now drink the water," the fairy said. Pinocchio took the glass, put his nose in it, and tried again, but said, "It's too bitter. I can't drink it." "How do you know if you haven't even tried it?" "I can smell it. I want another lump of sugar before I drink it." The fairy, being patient, gave him more sugar and handed him the glass again. Pinocchio complained, "I can't drink it. That pillow under my feet bothers me." The fairy took away the pillow. Pinocchio still refused, saying, "I don't like the door, it's half open." The fairy closed the door. Pinocchio cried, "I won't drink it, I won't, it's awful." The fairy said softly, "You'll regret this." "I don't care." "You're very sick." "I don't care." "In a few hours, the fever will take you far away." "I don't care." "Are you not afraid of dying?" "No, I'd rather die than drink that medicine." At that moment the door opened and 4 black rabbits entered, carrying a small black coffin. "What do you want from me?" Pinocchio asked. "We've come for you," said the largest rabbit. "For me? But I'm not dead yet." "No, not yet." "But you will be soon, because you refused to take the medicine that would have saved you." "Oh, fairy, please give me the medicine. I don't want to die," Pinocchio cried. He quickly drank the medicine and immediately felt better. "Well," said the rabbits, "we've come for nothing this time." They turned and walked out, carrying the coffin. In no time, Pinocchio jumped out of bed, feeling great. The fairy smiled and asked, "Did my medicine work for you?" "It did. It gave me new life." "Then why did I have to beg you to drink it?" I'm a boy, and boys don't like medicine. We like sugar more. What a shame. Boys should know that medicine can save them from pain and even from death. Next time I won't need to be asked. I'll remember the rabbits with their coffin, and I'll drink it right away. Now tell me how you ended up in the hands of the assassins. Pinocchio explained, Fire Eater gave me 5 gold coins for my father. But on the way, I met a fox and a cat. They asked if I wanted my 5 coins to become 2,000. I said yes. They said, come with us to the Field of Wonders. We stopped at the Inn of the Red Lobster for dinner and went to sleep. When I woke up, they were gone, and I was alone in the dark. I met 2 assassins in black sacks who said, your money or your life. I told them I didn't have any money, but I had put the coins under my tongue. One of them tried to put his hand in my mouth, and I bit it off. But it was a cat's paw, not a hand. They chased me, and after running for a long time, they caught me. They tied my neck with a rope and hanged me to a tree. They said, tomorrow we'll take your gold coins when you're dead. Where are the gold coins now? The fairy asked. I lost them, Pinocchio lied, though they were in his pocket. At his first lie, his nose grew a little longer. And where did you lose them? The fairy asked. In the woods, Pinocchio lied again. His nose grew a little longer. Well, we'll find them in the woods, the fairy said. Things lost there are always found. Pinocchio became confused and said, I didn't lose them in the woods. I swallowed them when I drank the medicine. At this third lie, his nose grew so long that it was hard to move. It bumped into the bed, the window, the walls, and the door. The fairy looked at him and laughed. Why are you laughing? Pinocchio asked, worried. I'm laughing at your lies. How do you know I'm lying? Lies are easy to see. There are 2 kinds of lies. Lies with short legs and lies with long noses. Yours have long noses. Pinocchio tried to escape, but his nose was so long he couldn't get out the door. Chapter 18. Pinocchio was very sad because of the long nose he had caused by telling lies. He tried to get out of the room, but his nose was so long that it didn't fit through the door. The fairy didn't feel sorry for him because she wanted to teach him a lesson, as lying is a very bad habit. But when she saw how frightened he was, she felt sorry for him and clapped her hands. Soon, 1,000 woodpeckers flew in and began pecking at Pinocchio's nose. They pecked so hard that, after a little while, his nose was back to its normal size. Pinocchio wiped his eyes and said, Thank you, fairy. I love you so much. I love you too, the fairy said. If you want, you can stay with me and be my little brother, and I'll be your good little sister. Pinocchio thought for a moment. I would love to stay, but what about my poor father? Don't worry, I've thought of everything. I've already sent for your father, and he will be here before night. Really? Pinocchio said excitedly. Then, fairy, if you let me, I would like to go and meet him. I can't wait to kiss him and tell him I'm sorry for everything. Of course, go ahead, but be careful and don't get lost. Take the forest path, and you'll find him. Pinocchio quickly ran through the forest like a rabbit. When he reached a giant oak tree, he stopped because he heard something in the bushes. It was the fox and the cat, the 2 he had met at the Inn of the Red Lobster. Here comes our dear Pinocchio, the fox said, hugging him. How did you get here? How did you get here? Asked the cat. It's a long story, Pinocchio replied. I was at the inn, and after you left, I met 2 assassins who wanted my money. The assassins? Oh, how terrible, the fox said. The worst kind, added the cat. Well, I ran, said Pinocchio, but they caught me and hanged me on a tree. He pointed to the oak tree nearby. Could anything be worse? The fox said. This world is awful. Where can we find a safe place? Said the cat. Pinocchio noticed that the cat was carrying his paw in a sling. "What happened to your paw?" he asked. The cat wanted to explain, but he was too twisted in his words, so the fox helped. "About an hour ago, we met a hungry wolf on the road. My friend, being kind, bit off his own paw and threw it to the wolf so he could eat." Pinocchio, almost crying, whispered, "If all cats were like you, the mice would be very lucky." "And what are you doing here?" the fox asked. "I'm waiting for my father. He'll be here soon," Pinocchio answered. "And your gold pieces?" the fox asked. "I still have them, except for one, which I spent at the inn. Think of how those 4 gold pieces could turn into 2,000 tomorrow. Why don't you listen to me? Why not plant them in the field of wonders?" the fox said. "I can't today, but I will go with you some other time." "It's too late. The field is closing today." "How far is the field of wonders?" Pinocchio asked. "It's only 2 miles away. Come with us. We can be there in half an hour. You can plant your money, and in a few minutes you will have 2,000 gold coins. Will you come?" Pinocchio thought for a moment, remembering the fairy, his father, and the talking cricket. Then he did what many boys do when they don't think. He shrugged and said, "Let's go. I'm with you." So they went. They walked for a long time and finally arrived in the city of Simple Simons. Pinocchio noticed many poor animals, like hungry dogs, cold sheep and chickens begging for food. He also saw beautiful coaches passing by with foxes, hawks, and vultures inside. "Where is the field of wonders?" Pinocchio asked, tired of waiting. "Be patient, we're almost there." They walked through the city, and outside the walls they reached a field that looked just like any other. "This is it," said the fox. "Dig a hole and put your gold pieces in it." Pinocchio did as he was told. He dug a hole, put the 4 gold pieces in, and covered them. "Now," said the fox, "go to the nearby stream, get a pail of water, and sprinkle it over the spot." Pinocchio didn't have a pail, so he used his shoe to carry the water and sprinkled it on the earth. "Anything else?" he asked. "No, now we can go. Come back in 20 minutes and you will find a tree full of gold coins," the fox said. Pinocchio was so happy he thanked the fox and the cat many times, promising to give them gifts. "We don't want your gifts," they said. "We are happy that we helped you become rich with little trouble." They left, wishing him good luck. Chapter 19. Pinocchio waited for a long time, walking back and forth, feeling more and more excited about the gold coins he would find. He thought about what he could do with all that money. What if I find not just 1,000 coins, but 2,000, or 5,000, or even 100,000? I could build a big palace with many horses, a cellar full of lemonade, and a library full of sweets. Thinking about all of this, he finally arrived at the place where he buried the coins. He looked around, but there was no tree full of gold coins. He stepped forward and looked more carefully. Still, nothing. Pinocchio was confused and scratched his head. Just then, he heard a loud laugh. He turned around and saw a parrot sitting on a tree, laughing as it cleaned its feathers. "What are you laughing at?" Pinocchio asked, annoyed. "I'm laughing because I tickled myself under my wings while cleaning," said the parrot. Pinocchio didn't respond. He went to the nearby stream, filled his shoe with water, and sprinkled it on the spot where he had buried the gold. The parrot laughed again, even louder. "What's so funny now?" Pinocchio asked angrily. "I'm laughing at people who believe everything and get tricked so easily," said the parrot. "Are you talking about me?" Pinocchio asked. "Yes, I mean you, poor Pinocchio. You believe that gold can grow like beans in a field. I believed that once too, and now I'm sorry for it. I've learned that to get money, you have to work for it." "I don't understand," Pinocchio said, starting to feel scared. "Let me explain," said the parrot. "While you were in the city, the fox and the cat came back. They took the 4 gold pieces you buried and ran away with them. If you catch them, You're a brave one." Pinocchio couldn't believe what the parrot said. He quickly started digging again. But when the hole was big enough, there were no coins. They were all gone. In a panic, Pinocchio ran back to the city and went straight to the courthouse to report the robbery. The judge was a large old monkey with a white beard and gold-rimmed glasses. Pinocchio told the judge everything that had happened, describing the fox and the cat, and asked for justice. The judge listened carefully, his eyes filled with kindness. When Pinocchio finished, the judge rang a bell. 2 big dogs dressed like police appeared. The judge pointed to Pinocchio and said in a serious voice, "This poor marionette has been robbed. Take him and throw him into prison." Pinocchio was shocked. He tried to protest, but the dogs quickly grabbed him and took him to jail. Pinocchio had to stay in jail for 4 long months. But then a lucky thing happened. The young emperor who ruled the city had won a big victory, and to celebrate, he opened all the prison doors. "If everyone else can go, can I go too?" Pinocchio asked the jailer. "Not you," the jailer said. "I'm a thief too," Pinocchio interrupted. "In that case, you are free," said the jailer. He took off his hat, bowed, and opened the prison door. Pinocchio ran out and didn't look back. Chapter 20. Pinocchio was so happy to be free. Without thinking, he ran away from the city and started on the road to return to the fairy's house. It had been raining for many days, and the road was so muddy that Pinocchio sank deep into the mud at times. But he didn't stop. He really wanted to see his father and the fairy with the blue hair. He ran fast, like a dog chasing a rabbit, but the mud splashed all over him, even on his hat. "I have been so unhappy," he said to himself. "But I deserve it because I'm very stubborn and silly. I always want to do things my way, and I never listen to the people who love me and are smarter than me. But from now on, I will try to be a good boy. I now know for sure that bad boys are never happy and always end up losing. I wonder if Father is waiting for me. Will I find him at the fairy's house? It's been so long since I've seen him, and I really miss him. And will the fairy forgive me for all I've done? She's been so good to me, and I owe her my life. I've been such a bad boy." Suddenly, Pinocchio stopped and froze in fear. What was it? A huge snake was lying across the road. The snake had bright green skin, fiery eyes, and a tail that smoked like a chimney. Pinocchio was so scared. He ran back for half a mile and sat down on a pile of stones to wait for the snake to move. He waited for hours, but the snake didn't move. Its eyes kept glowing red, and its tail kept smoking. Trying to be brave, Pinocchio walked up to the snake and said kindly, "Excuse me, Mr. Snake. Could you please move aside so I can pass?" But the snake didn't move at all. Pinocchio spoke again in a kind voice. "Mr. Snake, I'm going home where my father is waiting for me. I haven't seen him in so long. Would you mind letting me pass?" The snake didn't move, and it didn't answer. In fact, it suddenly became very still. Its eyes closed and its tail stopped smoking. "Is he dead?" Pinocchio wondered. He rubbed his hands together, happy. He was about to step over the snake when, suddenly, the snake sprang up and Pinocchio fell backward into the mud. His legs were in the air, and he was stuck. The snake laughed so much at the sight of Pinocchio struggling that he laughed so hard he fell over and died. Pinocchio quickly freed himself and started running again, hoping to reach the fairy's house before night. But then he felt very hungry. He saw some grapes in a field and decided to pick some. But as soon as he bent down, crack! His legs got stuck in a trap. The trap had been set by a farmer to catch weasels that were stealing his chickens. Chapter 21. Pinocchio, as you can imagine, began to cry and beg for help, but it was no use. There were no houses nearby, and no one was passing by on the road. Night came. Pinocchio was in pain from his legs, and he was also scared to be alone in the dark. Just as he was about to faint, he saw a tiny glowworm glowing nearby. He called to it and said, "Dear little glowworm, will you help me?" "Poor boy," the glowworm replied, stopping to look at him with sympathy. "How did you get caught in this trap?" "I stepped into the field to pick some grapes," Pinocchio began. "Are the grapes yours?" the glowworm asked. "No." "Why did you take what isn't yours?" "I was hungry." "Hunger isn't a reason to take something that belongs to someone else." "You're right," Pinocchio said, crying. "I won't do it again." Just then, Pinocchio heard footsteps. It was the farmer, coming to see if he had caught any weasels that had been stealing his chickens. The farmer was surprised when he saw a boy instead of a weasel. "Ah, you little thief," the farmer said angrily. "You're the one stealing my chickens." "No, no," Pinocchio cried, sobbing. "I only wanted a few grapes." "Someone who steals grapes might also steal chickens. I'll teach you a lesson you'll never forget." The farmer opened the trap, grabbed Pinocchio by the collar, and carried him to his house, just like a puppy. When they got to the yard, the farmer threw him to the ground, stepped on his neck, and said, "It's late now. We'll talk tomorrow. But tonight, since my dog died today, you'll take his place and guard my chicken coop." The farmer put a dog collar around Pinocchio's neck and attached a chain to it. The other end of the chain was nailed to the wall. "If it rains tonight, you can sleep in that doghouse over there. There's plenty of straw for a bed. It's been the dog's bed for 3 years, so it will be fine for you. And if any thieves come, be sure to bark." After saying this, the farmer went inside the house, locked the door, and went to bed. Poor Pinocchio lay by the doghouse, feeling cold, hungry, and scared. Sometimes he pulled at the collar, which almost choked him, and weakly said, "I deserve this. I've been a troublemaker. I've never listened to anyone, and I've always done what I wanted. If I had studied and worked with my father, I wouldn't be here now in the dark, pretending to be a dog. If only I could start over. But what's done is done, and I have to be patient." After thinking this, Pinocchio went into the doghouse and fell asleep. Chapter 22. Even though Pinocchio was very sad, he didn't cry. He stayed in the doghouse and fell asleep. But in the middle of the night, he woke up because he heard strange noises coming from the yard. He poked his head out of the doghouse and saw 4 weasels. These animals like to steal eggs and chickens. One weasel walked up to the doghouse and said in a sweet voice, "Good evening, Melampo." Pinocchio replied, "My name isn't Melampo." "Who are you then?" "I'm Pinocchio." "What are you doing here?" "I'm the watchdog." "Where is Melampo, the old dog who used to live here?" "He died this morning." "Poor Melampo. He was such a good dog. You look like a good dog, too." "I'm not a dog," Pinocchio said. "What are you then?" "I'm a marionette." "Are you taking Melampo's place?" "Yes, I am. I'm being punished." "Well, we made a deal with Melampo. I'm sure you'll agree to the same deal." "What's the deal?" "We'll visit the chicken coop sometimes. We'll take 8 chickens, 7 for us and 1 for you, if you don't bark and pretend to be sleeping." "Did Melampo really do that?" Pinocchio asked. "Yes, he did," the weasel said. "But you'll be good, right? We'll leave you a chicken for breakfast if you don't bark." Pinocchio shook his head and thought, "We'll see about that, my friends." When the weasels went to the chicken coop, Pinocchio quickly closed the door behind them. He blocked it with a stone and started barking loudly like a real dog. "Bow, wow, wow, bow, wow." The farmer heard the barking and jumped out of bed. He grabbed his gun and ran outside. "What's the matter?" he shouted. "The thieves are here," Pinocchio called. "Where are they?" "In the chicken coop." The farmer quickly ran to the coop, opened the door, and pulled out the weasels one by one. He tied them up and said, "I caught you. I could punish you now, but I'll wait. In the morning, I'll take you to the inn, and you'll make a nice dinner for someone." Then the farmer went to Pinocchio and petted him. "How did you catch them so quickly? Melampo never noticed them all these years." Pinocchio thought for a moment, but decided not to tell the farmer the truth about Melampo's deal with the weasels. He didn't want to speak ill of the dead. "Were you awake when they came?" asked the farmer. "I was asleep," Pinocchio said. "But they woke me up with their whispers. One even came to the door and said, 'If you don't bark, we'll give you a chicken for breakfast.' Did you hear that? They tried to bribe me. Even though I'm a bad marionette, I would never be bribed." "Good boy," said the farmer, smiling. "You should be proud. You're free now." The farmer took off the dog collar from Pinocchio's neck. Chapter 23. Pinocchio was very sad when he read the words on the marble slab. He cried and cried, kissing the cold stone. He cried all night, and in the morning he was still there, his sobs shaking his wooden body. He said to himself, "Oh, my dear fairy, why did you die? Why didn't I die instead of you? And where is my father? If I can't find him, I'll never leave him again. You can't really be dead. If you love me, you will come back alive. I'm so lonely. If the assassins come again, they will hang me again, and I will really die. What will I do without you and without my father? Oh, I want to die." Pinocchio even tried to pull his hair out, but he remembered it was just painted on his wooden head, so he couldn't. Then a large pigeon flew above him. The pigeon saw him and called out, "What are you doing down there?" Pinocchio looked up and said, "Can't you see? I'm crying." The pigeon asked, "Are you Pinocchio?" Pinocchio jumped up. "Yes, I'm Pinocchio." The pigeon flew down and said, "Do you know Geppetto?" "Yes, he's my father. Is he alive? Please tell me where he is." "I saw him 3 days ago by the sea. He was making a little boat to cross the ocean. He's been looking for you all over Europe, but now he's going to search for you in the New World." "Where is the sea?" asked Pinocchio. "It's more than 50 miles away," said the pigeon. "50 miles? I wish I had wings like you," said Pinocchio. "I can take you," said the pigeon. "Really? How?" "Climb onto my back." Pinocchio hopped onto the pigeon's back. He felt excited and shouted, "Go ahead, my pretty steed. I'm in a hurry." The pigeon flew up into the sky, and soon they were flying above the clouds. Pinocchio was a little scared, but he held on tight. After flying for a while, the pigeon said, "I'm thirsty." "I'm hungry," said Pinocchio. "Let's stop at that pigeon coop down there and rest for a bit." They stopped in the coop and found some water and chickpeas. Pinocchio didn't like chickpeas, but he ate them because he was so hungry. After eating, he said, "I never thought chickpeas could be so good." "You see," said the pigeon, "hunger is the best sauce." After resting a bit, they continued flying. By morning, they arrived at the seashore. Pinocchio jumped off the pigeon's back. The pigeon flew away without expecting anything in return. On the shore, many people were crying and looking out at the sea. Pinocchio asked an old woman, "What happened?" "A poor father lost his only son and built a little boat to search for him across the ocean. The sea is very rough, and we are afraid he will drown." "Where is the boat?" asked Pinocchio. "Over there," the old woman pointed. "It's very small, like a little shadow." Pinocchio looked and shouted, "It's my father! It's my father!" The little boat was tossed by the waves. Pinocchio stood on a rock and waved his hat, his hands, even his nose. It seemed like his father saw him because he waved back. He seemed to be telling everyone that he would return if he could, but the waves were too strong. Then a huge wave came, and the boat disappeared. They waited, but it didn't come back. "Poor man," the people said, and they said a prayer as they turned to leave. Suddenly, Pinocchio jumped into the sea. He cried out, "I'll save him! I'll save my father!" Pinocchio swam like a fish in the rough water. Sometimes he disappeared and then came back up. Soon he was far from land. The people on the shore said, "Poor boy," and said another prayer as they walked away. Chapter 24. Pinocchio arrives at the island of the busy bees and finds the fairy again. Pinocchio swam all night, hoping to find his father and save him in time. It was a terrible night. It rained hard, there was hail, thunder, and lightning so bright that it made the night look like day. At dawn, Pinocchio saw a long stretch of sand not far from him. It was an island in the middle of the sea. Pinocchio tried hard to swim to the island, but the waves kept pushing him around. Finally, a big wave threw him onto the island. The wave was so strong that it almost broke his body. But he got up quickly and said, "I'm alive again." The sky started to clear, the sun came out, and the sea became calm. Pinocchio took off his wet clothes and put them on the sand to dry. He looked around the water to see if he could see a boat with a man in it. He searched, but all he saw was the sea and some small sails in the distance that looked like birds. "If only I knew the name of this island," he thought. "What kind of people live here? But there's no one to ask." Pinocchio felt lonely and sad. Just then he saw a big fish swimming nearby with its head out of the water. Not knowing what to call the fish, Pinocchio said, "Hello, Mr. Fish. Can I talk to you?" The fish, a polite dolphin, answered, "Sure, you can talk to me." "Can you tell me if there's anywhere on this island where I can eat without being eaten?" Pinocchio asked. "Yes, there is," said the dolphin. "There is a place not far from here." "How can I get there?" "Take the path to your left and follow your nose. You can't miss it. By the way, have you seen a little boat with my father in it?" "Who is your father?" asked the dolphin. "He is the best father in the world, and I am the worst son." "The storm last night must have sunk your boat," said the dolphin. "And your father?" "By now the terrible shark must have eaten him." "The terrible shark?" Pinocchio asked, shaking with fear. "How big is it?" "It's bigger than a 5-story building," said the dolphin. "Its mouth is so big that a whole train could fit in it." Pinocchio, terrified, quickly dressed and said, "Goodbye, Mr. Fish. Thank you for your help." Pinocchio ran as fast as he could, looking behind him every time he heard a noise, afraid the shark was coming after him. After walking for half an hour, he reached a small place called the land of the busy bees. There were people everywhere, all working hard. No one was lazy or resting. "This isn't the place for me," said Pinocchio, tired. "I wasn't made for work." Pinocchio started to feel hungry because it had been 24 hours since he last ate. He had 2 choices, work or beg. He didn't want to beg because his father always told him that only sick or old people should beg. The poor people who needed help were those who couldn't work anymore because of age or sickness. Everyone else should work. If they didn't and went hungry, it was their own fault. Just then, a man pulling 2 heavy carts of coal passed by, sweating. Pinocchio looked at him and asked shyly, "Could you give me a penny? I'm very hungry." The coal man replied, "I'll give you 4 pennies if you help me pull these carts." Pinocchio was shocked and said, "I'm not a donkey. I don't pull carts." "Good for you," said the coal man. "Then you can eat your pride, and I hope it fills you up." A few minutes later, a bricklayer walked by, carrying a bucket of plaster. "Excuse me, sir, could you spare a penny for a hungry boy?" Pinocchio asked. "Of course," said the bricklayer. "Come help me carry the plaster, and I'll give you 5 pennies. Pinocchio replied, "The plaster is too heavy, and the work is too hard for me." "Well, enjoy your hunger then," said the bricklayer. Pinocchio kept asking people for help, but no one gave him anything. They all told him to work instead of begging. Finally, a kind woman walked by with 2 water jugs. "Excuse me, may I have a drink from your jug?" asked Pinocchio, feeling thirsty. "Of course, my boy," she said, setting the jugs on the ground. After drinking, Pinocchio said, "I'm not thirsty anymore. If only my hunger could go away too." The woman smiled and said, "If you help me carry these jugs home, I'll give you some bread." Pinocchio didn't answer right away, but the woman added, "I'll also give you cauliflower with sauce." Pinocchio still didn't say anything, so the woman offered, "And some cake with jam." Pinocchio couldn't resist any more and said, "Okay, I'll help you." The jug was heavy, so Pinocchio had to carry it on his head. When they got to her house, the woman gave Pinocchio bread, cauliflower, and cake. He ate everything very quickly, and his hunger was finally satisfied. He looked up to thank the woman, but when he saw her face, he gasped in surprise. "Why are you surprised?" she asked, laughing. Because you look like the same voice, the same eyes, the same hair. Yes, you have the same blue hair she had. Oh, my little fairy, please tell me it's really you. I've cried so much, I've suffered so." Pinocchio fell to the ground, hugging the woman's knees, overjoyed. Chapter 25. Pinocchio promises the fairy to be good and study, as he is tired of being a marionette and wants to become a real boy. Pinocchio cried so much that the fairy thought he might melt away. Finally, she told him that she was the little fairy with azure hair. "You naughty marionette, how did you know it was me?" she asked, laughing. "My love for you told me who you were," Pinocchio replied. "Do you remember? You left me when I was a little girl, and now you find me as a grown woman. I'm so old I could almost be your mother," said the fairy. Pinocchio smiled and said, "I'm glad, because now I can call you mother instead of sister. I've always wanted a mother, just like other boys. But how did you grow so quickly?" "That's a secret," the fairy said with a smile. "Please tell me. I want to grow too. Look at me. I haven't grown taller than a small piece of cheese." "But you can't grow," said the fairy. "Why not?" asked Pinocchio. "Because marionettes never grow. They are born marionettes, they live marionettes, and they die marionettes," the fairy explained. "I'm so tired of being a marionette," Pinocchio cried. "I want to grow into a man, just like everyone else." "You will, if you deserve it," said the fairy. "Really? What do I have to do to deserve it?" Pinocchio asked. "It's simple," said the fairy. "Just try to be a good child." "Don't you think I am?" Pinocchio asked. "No, good boys are obedient, but you," the fairy started. "I never obey," Pinocchio admitted. "Good boys love study and work, but you," the fairy continued. "I'm lazy and I don't want to work," Pinocchio said. "Good boys always tell the truth," said the fairy. "I always lie," said Pinocchio. "Good boys go to school willingly," the fairy added. "I get sick if I go to school," said Pinocchio. "But I'll change from now on." "Do you promise?" the fairy asked. "I promise. I want to be a good boy and make my father proud. Where is my poor father now?" "I don't know," the fairy replied. "Will I ever be lucky enough to find him and hug him again?" Pinocchio asked. "I think so. I'm sure of it," said the fairy. Pinocchio was overjoyed. He grabbed the fairy's hands and kissed them so hard it looked like he might lose his head. Then he looked at her lovingly and asked, "Tell me, little mother, you aren't dead, are you?" "It doesn't seem so," the fairy answered, smiling. Pinocchio sighed with relief. "If you only knew how much I suffered and cried when I read, 'Here lies.' I know, and for that I have forgiven you. Your sorrow showed me you have a kind heart. There's always hope for boys like you, even if they are mischievous at times. That's why I've come to find you. From now on, I'll be your little mother, said the fairy. "Oh, how wonderful!" Pinocchio cried, jumping with joy. "You will always obey me and do as I say?" asked the fairy. "Gladly, more than gladly," Pinocchio said. "Tomorrow you'll start going to school every day," said the fairy. Pinocchio's face dropped a little. "Then you will choose a job that you like," the fairy added. Pinocchio's face grew serious. "What are you mumbling to yourself?" asked the fairy. Pinocchio whispered, "I was just thinking that it's probably too late for me to go to school now." "No, it's never too late to learn," the fairy said kindly. "But I don't want a job," Pinocchio complained. "Why?" asked the fairy. "Because work is tiring," Pinocchio answered. "My dear boy," said the fairy, "people who talk like that end up either in prison or the hospital. Whether rich or poor, everyone must do something in this world. No one can be happy without work. Laziness is a dangerous illness, and it must be cured right away. If not, it will destroy you." These words touched Pinocchio's heart. He looked at the fairy and said seriously, "I'll work, I'll study, I'll do everything you ask. The life of a marionette is tiring, and I want to become a real boy no matter how hard it is. You promise I can?" "Yes, I promise. Now it's up to you," said the fairy. Chapter 26. Pinocchio goes to the seashore with his friends to see the terrible shark. Early in the morning, Pinocchio set off for school. When the other boys saw a marionette walking into the classroom, they couldn't stop laughing. They laughed so hard they cried. They played tricks on him. One boy took off his hat, another pulled his coat, and a third tried to paint a mustache under his nose. One even tried to tie strings to his feet and hands to make him dance. Pinocchio stayed calm at first, but eventually he couldn't take it anymore. He turned to the boys and said threateningly, "Be careful, boys. I didn't come here to be made fun of. I'll respect you, and I want you to respect me." The boys laughed even harder. One of them, more daring than the rest, reached out to pinch Pinocchio's nose, but Pinocchio was quicker. He stretched out his leg under the table and kicked the boy hard on the shin. "Ouch! What hard feet!" the boy cried, rubbing his shin. "And what hard elbows! They're even harder than the feet!" shouted another boy, who had gotten a blow to the stomach from Pinocchio's elbow. With that kick and blow, Pinocchio won everyone's respect. The other boys admired him, showered him with attention, and tried to be his friend. As time passed, even the teacher praised Pinocchio. He noticed that Pinocchio was always focused, hard-working, and the first to arrive in the morning, and the last to leave when school ended. Pinocchio's only problem was that he had too many bad friends. Many of them didn't care about studying or success. The teacher warned him every day, and the good fairy also told him many times, "Be careful, Pinocchio. Those bad friends will make you lose your love for studying. They will lead you astray someday." "There's no danger," Pinocchio replied, shrugging his shoulders as if to say, "I'm too smart for that." One day, while walking to school, Pinocchio met some boys who ran up to him excitedly and said, "Have you heard the news?" "No," Pinocchio replied. "A shark as big as a mountain has been spotted near the shore." "Really? I wonder if it's the same shark I heard about when my father was drowned," Pinocchio said. "We're going to see it. Are you coming?" one of the boys asked. "No, I can't. I have to go to school," Pinocchio said. "Who cares about school?" one of them said. "You can go tomorrow, a lesson here or there. We're all the same." "What will the teacher say?" Pinocchio asked. "Let him talk. He's paid to complain all day," they answered. "And what about my mother?" Pinocchio asked. "Mothers don't know anything," one of them said. Pinocchio thought for a moment and then said, "You know what? I also want to see that shark, but I'll go after school. I can see it just as well then." "Poor fool," one boy said. "Do you think that giant fish is going to just stay there waiting for you? It will swim away and no one will know you even came." "How long does it take to get to the shore?" Pinocchio asked. "It's an hour there and back," the boy replied. "Well then, let's see who gets there first," Pinocchio said. With that, they all ran off, books under their arms. Pinocchio led the way, running as fast as he could, and the other boys followed as fast as they could. Every now and then, Pinocchio looked back, seeing how tired the other boys were, their tongues hanging out. He laughed loudly, thinking he was ahead of them. But little did he know that the consequences of his disobedience would soon catch up to him. Chapter 27. The great battle between Pinocchio and his playmates. One is wounded. Pinocchio is arrested. Pinocchio ran as fast as he could to the shore, reaching it quickly. But when he looked around, he saw no shark. The sea was calm and still. "Hey boys, where's the shark?" he called to his playmates. "He probably went for breakfast," one boy joked. "Or maybe he went to take a nap," another one laughed. From their teasing, Pinocchio realized they had tricked him. "What's the joke?" he asked, getting angry. "Oh, the joke is on you!" They all laughed, dancing around him. "And what's the joke?" Pinocchio asked. "That you skipped school to come with us. Aren't you ashamed of always being a goody-goody and studying so hard? You never have any fun," they teased. "And what's it to you if I study?" Pinocchio replied. "You mean, what does the teacher think of us?" one of them asked. "Why?" Pinocchio replied. "Don't you see? If you study and we don't, you'll be the smart one, and we'll look like fools. It's only fair to take care of ourselves." "What do you want me to do?" asked Pinocchio. "Hate school, books, and teachers, just like we do. They're your enemies, you know, and they want to make you miserable." "And if I keep studying, what will you do to me?" Pinocchio asked. "You'll pay for it," they threatened. Pinocchio laughed. "Really, you amuse me," he said. One of the boys, the tallest of them all, shouted, "That's enough. We're tired of hearing you brag. You might not be afraid of us, but remember, there are 7 of us, and only 1 of you." "Like the 7 deadly sins," Pinocchio joked. "Did you hear that? He called us sins," one of the boys shouted. "Apologize or look out," they demanded. Pinocchio mocked them, sticking his thumb to his nose and saying, "Cuckoo! You'll regret that," they yelled. "Cuckoo!" Pinocchio taunted again. "We'll teach you a lesson," one of the boys shouted. Pinocchio stuck his thumb to his nose again and said, "Cuckoo!" Finally, the boldest of the boys gave Pinocchio a hard blow to the head. Pinocchio immediately struck back, and the fight began. Though he was alone, Pinocchio fought bravely. He used his wooden feet to kick and strike so quickly that the other boys kept their distance, wincing in pain whenever he landed a hit. Unable to fight close to him, the boys started throwing books at Pinocchio. Readers, geography books, history books, and grammars flew through the air, but Pinocchio was fast, and all the books missed, landing in the sea. The fish, curious, swam up to nibble at the books, but after tasting a few pages, they spat them out with disgust, as if to say, "What a horrible taste! Our own food is much better." Meanwhile, the fight continued fiercely. A large crab, noticing the chaos, crawled out of the water and shouted in a voice like a trombone with a cold, "Stop fighting! These battles never end well. Trouble is sure to come." But Pinocchio just mocked the crab. "Keep quiet, ugly crab. Go to bed and sleep off that cold you've got." The boys, having thrown all their books, spotted Pinocchio's bag lying nearby. They grabbed it and began searching for new ammunition. One boy picked up an arithmetic book, which was Pinocchio's favorite. It was big and heavy and made of leather. Thinking it would make a good weapon, he threw it at Pinocchio's head. But instead of hitting Pinocchio, it struck one of the other boys. The boy fell to the ground, pale as a ghost, and fainted. "Oh no! Help! I'm dying!" the boy cried weakly, clutching his head. Seeing the boy lying motionless, The others ran away in fear, leaving Pinocchio behind. Pinocchio, scared and feeling guilty, ran to the sea. He soaked a handkerchief in water and used it to try to help his friend, Eugene. He called out desperately, "Eugene, open your eyes! Look at me! Why don't you answer? It wasn't me who hit you, I swear! Please, wake up!" "I'm sorry. Why didn't I go to school? I should have listened to my teacher and my mother. They warned me about bad company, but I didn't listen. Now I'm in trouble. What will happen to me? How will I face my little mother? What will become of me?" Pinocchio continued crying and calling his friend's name when he suddenly heard heavy footsteps approaching. He looked up and saw 2 carabineers coming toward him. "What are you doing on the ground?" one of the officers asked. "I'm helping my schoolmate," Pinocchio replied. "He's fainted?" asked one of the carabineers, checking Eugene. "Yes," Pinocchio said. "He's been hurt." "With what?" the officer asked. "This book," Pinocchio said, picking up the arithmetic book. "Whose book is this?" the officer asked. "It's mine," said Pinocchio. "Enough," the carabineer said firmly. "Get up and come with us." Pinocchio tried to protest, but the officer interrupted. "No more words. Get up and come with us." Pinocchio, despite his fear, followed the officers. They called for a couple of fishermen passing by and asked them to take Eugene home and tend to his wounds. "Tomorrow, we'll come back for Pinocchio," they said. With that, the officers grabbed Pinocchio and ordered him to march quickly. Pinocchio, trembling, felt like he was in a nightmare. His legs shook, his mouth was dry, and he couldn't say a word. As they walked toward the village, Pinocchio felt terrible at the thought of passing by the fairy's house. What would she think seeing him in the custody of 2 officers? As they reached the village, a gust of wind blew off Pinocchio's cap and sent it flying down the street. "Can I go get my cap?" Pinocchio asked the carabineers. "Quickly, but hurry," they allowed. Pinocchio ran to get his cap, but instead of putting it on his head, he shoved it between his teeth and dashed toward the sea. He ran like a bullet. The officers sent a large dog after him, a champion racing dog. Pinocchio and the dog raced through the street, kicking up so much dust that the crowd couldn't see who was winning. In the end, the dust cloud was so thick, no one could tell where the race had ended. Chapter 28. Pinocchio runs the danger of being fried in a pan like a fish. During that wild chase, Pinocchio had a terrifying moment when he thought he might be caught for good. The mastiff, named Alidoro, was running so fast that he was almost right behind him. Pinocchio could hear the dog's heavy breathing, and sometimes he even felt the hot air from Alidoro's mouth. Luckily, Pinocchio was very close to the shore, just a few steps away from the beach. As soon as his feet hit the sand, he jumped into the water. Alidoro tried to stop, but since he was running too fast, he ended up falling into the sea as well. Surprisingly, the dog couldn't swim. He splashed around desperately, his head poking above the water as he barked, "I'm drowning! I'm drowning!" Pinocchio, now safely away, couldn't help but shout, "Drown? Well, that's your problem." "Please, Pinocchio, help me! Save me from dying!" Alidoro cried out. Moved by the dog's suffering, Pinocchio's kind heart couldn't ignore him. He turned back and called out, "If I save you, will you promise never to chase me again?" I promise. Please hurry. If you wait any longer, I'll be gone." Pinocchio hesitated for a moment, remembering his father's words that a good deed is never wasted. He swam back and grabbed Alidoro's tail, pulling him to safety. The dog, exhausted and bloated from swallowing so much salt water, couldn't stand. But Pinocchio didn't trust him completely. He quickly swam back out into the sea and called, "Goodbye, Alidoro. Good luck, and don't forget me." "Goodbye, little Pinocchio," Alidoro called. "Thank you for saving my life. You did me a good turn, and good turns always come back. If I can, I'll repay you someday." Pinocchio swam close to shore, thinking he was safe. He spotted a cave ahead with smoke rising from it. There must be a fire in there, Pinocchio thought. I can dry my clothes and warm myself up. That's just what I need. He swam closer to the rocks, but as he tried to climb, something lifted him up higher and higher. Before he could escape, he realized he was caught in a giant net filled with struggling fish. A fisherman, emerging from the cave, was so ugly that Pinocchio thought he must be a sea monster. His head was covered in thick green grass instead of hair, and his skin, eyes, and long beard were all green, making him look like a giant lizard. When the fisherman pulled the net out of the sea, he cried out joyfully, "Blessed Providence! Another fine meal of fish!" "Thank goodness I'm not a fish," Pinocchio whispered to himself, trying to stay calm. The fisherman took the fish to the cave, where a large pan of oil was sizzling over a smoky fire, filling the air with a repelling smell. The fisherman started pulling fish out of the net. "These mullets look great," he said, admiring the fish. He threw them into a large tub. He continued pulling out more fish, commenting on how good they looked. "These bass are delicious, lovely white fish, perfect flounders, and these anchovies are just right." One by one, the fish were added to the tub. Finally, Pinocchio was the last to be pulled out of the net. The fisherman, staring at Pinocchio, widened his green eyes in surprise. "What kind of fish is this?" he muttered. "I've never seen anything like it." He turned Pinocchio over and over before saying, "I understand. You must be a crab." Pinocchio, humiliated, replied angrily, "A crab? Nonsense. I'm not a crab. I'm a marionette. You better listen to me." "A marionette?" the fisherman asked. "Well, a marionette fish is new to me. That's even better. I'll eat you with more pleasure." Pinocchio tried to reason with the fisherman. "But I'm not a fish. I can talk and think just like you." "True," the fisherman replied. "But since you talk and think like a fish, I'll treat you with respect. I'll let you choose how you want to be cooked. Would you prefer to be fried in a pan or cooked with tomato sauce?" Pinocchio, terrified, begged, "I'd rather be free and go home." "Free? Do you think I'll waste the chance to eat such a rare fish?" the fisherman scoffed. "I'll fry you in the pan with the others. It'll be nice to have company." Pinocchio cried out in fear. "How much better it would have been to go to school. I listened to my friends, and now I'm paying for it. Oh, how I regret it." As the fisherman struggled to tie him up, Pinocchio squirmed, trying to escape. But the fisherman quickly tied his hands and feet, then tossed him into the tub with the other fish. The fisherman grabbed a bowl of flour and started rolling the fish in it. One by one, the fish were coated in flour and then thrown into the hot pan. First the mullets, then the bass, the whitefish, the flounders, and the anchovies. Finally, it was Pinocchio's turn. Pinocchio, trembling with fear, could hardly beg for his life. His body was stiff with terror, and he couldn't speak. The fisherman, not realizing it was Pinocchio, turned him over in the flour, making him look like a white marionette made of chalk. Then, the fisherman grabbed him by the head, ready to throw him into the hot oil. Chapter 29. Pinocchio returns to the fairy's house, and she promises him that on the morrow he will cease to be a marionette and become a boy. A wonderful party of coffee and milk to celebrate the great event. As Pinocchio lay there, he thought about how the fisherman's words had been true. He knew there was no hope left. He closed his eyes and braced himself for the end. Suddenly, the door of the cave burst open, and a large dog, drawn by the smell of the boiling oil, came running in. "Get out!" the fisherman yelled, still holding on to Pinocchio, who was covered in flour. But the hungry dog, whining and wagging his tail, begged, "Please, just give me a bite of that fish, and I'll leave peacefully." "Get out, I said," the fisherman repeated, preparing to kick the dog. But the dog, too hungry to back down, turned on the fisherman and bared his teeth. Just then, Pinocchio, in a voice full of fear, cried out, "Save me, Alidoro! If you don't, I'll be fried!" The dog immediately recognized Pinocchio's voice, and, shocked to see that the voice came from the flour-covered bundle the fisherman held, leaped forward. In one motion, he snatched Pinocchio up in his mouth and ran out of the cave. The fisherman, furious at having his meal taken away, ran after the dog. But a sudden coughing fit forced him to stop. Alidoro, having found his way out, stopped once he reached the village, carefully dropping Pinocchio onto the ground. "Thank you so much," Pinocchio said, feeling incredibly grateful. "No need to thank me," the dog replied. "You saved me once, and what's given is always returned. We're here to help each other." Pinocchio, still shaken, asked, "But how did you find me in that cave?" "I was lying on the sand, feeling half dead, when I smelled the fried fish. It was the smell that led me here," Alidoro explained. "If I had come just a moment later, you would have been cooked already." Pinocchio, shuddering, said, "Don't even mention it. If you had been any later, I would have been fried, eaten, and digested by now. Brrr, I shiver just thinking about it." Alidoro chuckled and held out his paw. Pinocchio took it gratefully. "Goodbye, Alidoro," said Pinocchio, and the dog went back home. Pinocchio walked to a nearby hut where an old man sat in the doorway, soaking up the sun. "Good man, have you heard anything about a poor boy named Eugene, who had a wounded head?" "Oh, the boy was brought here," the old man replied. "He's now back home." "Really? Is he all right?" Pinocchio asked excitedly. "The wound could have been fatal," the man said. "A heavy book was thrown at his head." Pinocchio's heart sank. "Who threw the book?" "Pinocchio," the man replied. Pinocchio feigned ignorance. "Who's that?" "He's a mischievous boy, a troublemaker. They say he's lazy and always running around instead of studying." "Lies! All lies!" Pinocchio cried. The man looked confused. "Do you know him?" "I've seen him," Pinocchio said. "What do you think of him?" Pinocchio quickly said, "I think he's a good boy, loves study, listens to his father, and is kind to his family." But when he touched his nose, he realized it had grown much longer. "Oh no," he thought. "It's growing because I'm lying." He quickly corrected himself, saying, "Forget what I said. I know Pinocchio. He's a lazy boy, always running off with his friends instead of studying." The moment he spoke the truth, his nose returned to normal. The old man asked, "Why do you look so pale?" Pinocchio hesitated. I rubbed against a freshly painted wall," he lied, ashamed. "What happened to your clothes?" "They were stolen by thieves. Can you spare a little outfit for me to wear?" The old man handed him a bag of hops. Pinocchio, not waiting for more, cut holes in the bag and slipped it on like a shirt, then started toward the village. He was filled with dread, thinking of how he would face the fairy. "What will she say when she sees me?" he wondered. "I don't deserve her forgiveness. I'm always making promises I don't keep." The rain was pouring when he arrived at the fairy's house. It was dark, and he hesitated before knocking on the door. He tried several times, each time running away in fear. Finally, on the fourth try, he knocked softly. He waited, then waited some more. After what felt like forever, a window opened on the top floor, and a snail with a glowing light on her head looked out. "Who knocks at this hour?" she called. "Is the fairy home?" Pinocchio asked. "She's asleep and doesn't want to be disturbed." "Who are you?" "It's me, Pinocchio." "Pinocchio?" the snail asked. "Wait for me. I'll come down." Pinocchio shivered in the cold, begging the snail to hurry. But the snail, being a snail, took her time. An hour passed, then another. Pinocchio knocked again, louder this time, complaining about the wait. "My dear boy," the snail answered, "I am a snail. Snails are never in a hurry." Time passed, and finally, at dawn, the door opened. The snail had made her slow journey from the top floor to the street. "What happened with your foot in the door?" she asked, laughing. Pinocchio explained, "It was a misfortune. Could you help me?" The snail, amused, replied, "We need a carpenter here, not me." Pinocchio asked her to fetch the fairy, but the snail reminded him that the fairy was asleep. "Well, at least bring me something to eat. I'm starving," Pinocchio begged. "Of course," the snail replied. 3.5 hours later, the snail returned with a tray of food. Pinocchio's stomach rumbled as he saw the bread, chicken, and fruit, but his joy quickly turned to disgust when he realized it was all made of chalk, cardboard, and alabaster. Frustrated and exhausted, Pinocchio fainted. When he woke up, he found himself lying on a sofa, and the fairy was sitting beside him. "This time, I forgive you," the fairy said kindly, "but be careful not to get into trouble again." Pinocchio promised to be good and study. He kept his word, and at the end of the year, he passed all his exams with top marks. The fairy, proud of him, said happily, "Tomorrow your wish will come true." "What wish?" Pinocchio asked. "Tomorrow you will no longer be a marionette. You will become a real boy." Pinocchio was overjoyed. To celebrate, he invited all his friends and schoolmates to a big party. The fairy promised to prepare 200 cups of coffee and milk and 400 slices of buttered toast. The day was meant to be full of happiness, but of course, in a marionette's life, there's always a but that can spoil everything. Chapter 30. Pinocchio, instead of becoming a boy, runs away to the land of toys with his friend Lampwick. Pinocchio, still in shock from the fairy's words, asked if he could go and give out invitations to the party. "Of course you can invite your friends," the fairy agreed. "But remember, you must return before dark. Do you understand?" "I'll be back in 1 hour, I promise," Pinocchio assured her. "Be careful, Pinocchio. Boys make promises easily, but they forget them just as quickly. I'm not like that. When I give my word, I keep it," Pinocchio replied. "We shall see," the fairy said. "If you disobey, you will be the one to suffer, not anyone else." "Why?" Pinocchio asked. "Because boys who don't listen to their elders always come to grief," she explained. "I've certainly had my share of troubles," said Pinocchio, "but from now on, I'll obey." "Let's see if you keep that promise," the fairy replied. Pinocchio left the house, singing and dancing, excited to invite his friends. In little over an hour, he had invited all of them. Some accepted right away, while others needed some coaxing. But when they heard the toast would be buttered on both sides, they all happily agreed to come. Among his friends, there was one whom Pinocchio loved most of all. His name was Romeo, but everyone called him Lampwick because he was long and thin, with a gloomy look on his face. Lampwick was the laziest and naughtiest boy in school, but Pinocchio adored him. Pinocchio went straight to Lampwick's house to invite him to the party, but Lampwick wasn't home. He went again, and then a third time, but still no sign of his friend. Where could he be? Pinocchio searched everywhere, and finally, he found Lampwick hiding behind a farmer's wagon. "What are you doing here?" Pinocchio asked. "I'm waiting for midnight to strike," Lampwick replied. "Waiting for midnight? Where are you going?" "Far, far away," Lampwick said with a grin. "I've been looking for you all day." "What's going on?" Pinocchio asked. "Haven't you heard the news?" Lampwick asked, raising an eyebrow. "Tomorrow I'm going to stop being a marionette and become a real boy just like you." "Good luck with that," Pinocchio said. "Are you coming to my party tomorrow?" Pinocchio asked eagerly. "I'm leaving tonight," Lampwick replied. "Leaving? But where are you going?" "I'm going to the land of toys," Lampwick said, eyes wide with excitement. Pinocchio was puzzled. "What's the land of toys?" "It's the best place in the world," Lampwick said. "No school, no teachers, no books. Every day is like a Saturday, except for Sundays. It's vacation all year round, from January 1st to December 31st. Why don't you come too?" Pinocchio hesitated. "I'm not sure. I promised the fairy I'd behave, and I want to keep my word." Lampwick grinned. "You're making a mistake, Pinocchio. Trust me, if you don't come, you'll regret it. There's no place better for you and me. What could be better than endless play and fun? Forget school, forget study." Pinocchio was tempted. "What do you do in this land of toys? Play all day, every day. When it's night, we sleep, and then the next day, the fun starts again. What do you think of that?" Pinocchio nodded thoughtfully, his mind torn. "It sounds great, but—" "Do you want to come or not?" Lampwick pressed. "Yes or no?" "No, I promised the fairy," Pinocchio said firmly. "I have to go back home before nightfall." "Wait 2 more minutes," Lampwick pleaded. "Just 2 minutes." "No, I can't. The fairy will scold me." "Let her scold you. After a while, she'll get tired of it," Lampwick teased. Pinocchio took a deep breath. "I must go. I promised her, and I will keep my promise." Lampwick laughed. "Good luck with that. You're missing out on the best place in the world." Pinocchio turned to leave, but then stopped. "Is it true that there are no schools in the land of toys?" "Not even the shadow of one," Lampwick confirmed. "No teachers either?" "Not a single one," Lampwick said with a smile. Pinocchio's mouth watered at the thought of no school, no studying. "What a wonderful place," he said, almost hypnotized. "You should come with me," Lampwick urged. Pinocchio struggled with his decision. "I promised the fairy, but I can't stop thinking about that land. It sounds too good." Lampwick laughed. "You're missing out. The wagon will be here soon. You should come." Pinocchio hesitated. "Well, how soon are you leaving?" "Very soon. The wagon comes at midnight." Pinocchio stood there, torn between his promise and the temptation of the land of toys. Finally, in a sudden rush of excitement, he said, "I'll stay here for a little while longer, but I'll see you off soon." Lampwick smiled. "Don't take too long. The wagon will be leaving soon, and you'll miss it." As the night grew darker, a small light flickered in the distance. The sound of a soft bell or a buzzing mosquito filled the air. "There it is!" Lampwick cried, jumping up. Pinocchio turned to him. "What's that?" "The wagon! It's coming!" Lampwick said eagerly. Pinocchio stood, torn. "What should I do?" Lampwick grinned. "Come with me, and we'll have a blast in the land of toys." Pinocchio looked longingly at the light in the distance, but then said, "No, I must go home." Lampwick waved goodbye. "Good luck with the fairy, but remember you're missing out on the best place in the world." Pinocchio turned and ran back toward home, but he couldn't help but feel the pull of the land of toys, wondering what could be waiting for him there. Chapter 31. After 5 months of play, Pinocchio wakes up one fine morning and finds a great surprise awaiting him. Finally, the wagon arrived. Its wheels were wrapped in straw and rags, making no noise as it rolled along. It was pulled by 12 pairs of donkeys, all the same size but of different colors. Some were gray, some white, and others a mix of brown and black. There were even some with bright yellow and blue stripes. The most unusual thing was that these donkeys wore shoes like the ones boys wear, made of leather and laced up, instead of iron horseshoes. The driver of the wagon was a little round man who was much wider than he was tall. He looked like a ball of butter, with a shiny apple-like face, a small mouth that was always smiling, and a voice soft and sweet, like a cat begging for food. As soon as the boys saw him, they immediately liked him, and wanted to ride in his wagon to the wonderful land of toys. The wagon was so packed with boys that it looked like a box of sardines. They were squished together, hardly able to breathe, but no one complained. The excitement of going to a place with no school, no books, and no teachers made them so happy that they didn't notice the discomfort. When the wagon stopped, the little man turned to Lampwick with a smile and asked, "Do you want to come to my wonderful country?" "Of course," Lampwick answered eagerly. "But I must warn you, there's no room left in the wagon," the little man said, shaking his head. "That's fine," Lampwick said. "If there's no room inside, I can sit on top of the coach." And just like that, Lampwick jumped onto the roof of the wagon. Turning to Pinocchio, the little man asked, "What about you? Are you coming with us or staying here?" Pinocchio hesitated. "I'm staying. I want to go home and study. I promised the fairy that I would be a good boy." "Good luck with that," the little man said with a wink. "Pinocchio!" Lampwick shouted from the top of the wagon. "Come with us, and we'll always be happy." "No, no, no," Pinocchio answered, shaking his head. "But think about it," Lampwick cried. "We'll be free. No more school, no more lessons, just fun every day." Pinocchio began to weaken. "What would my fairy say if I went with you?" he asked. "Don't worry about her," Lampwick said. "You're going to a place where we can make noise all day, do whatever we want. No rules, no teachers, no books." Pinocchio was torn, but he still tried to resist. "I promised the fairy," he said, his voice filled with doubt. "I promised to be good." The little man smiled. "Make room for me then," Pinocchio finally said. "I'll come." The little man moved aside. "I'll give you my place as the coachman," he said. Pinocchio walked up to the first donkey, trying to climb onto its back, but the donkey kicked him hard in the stomach, sending him flying onto the ground. The other boys burst into laughter. The little man walked up to the donkey and lovingly bit off half its ear. "Now, try again," he said to Pinocchio. Pinocchio climbed back onto the donkey, but suddenly the donkey kicked him again, throwing him into the road. More laughter followed. The little man bit off the other half of the donkey's ear and smiled at Pinocchio. "Now try again." He's calm now. Pinocchio mounted the donkey once more, and the wagon began its journey. As they rode along, Pinocchio heard a faint voice whispering to him, "Poor silly. You think you're having fun, but soon enough you'll regret it. Boys who forget their studies and chase after pleasure always end up in trouble." Pinocchio looked around, but saw no one. The wagon continued on its way. The boys slept peacefully, and the little man hummed quietly to himself. After a while, Pinocchio heard the voice again. "Remember, little fool, boys who stop studying and chase after fun instead of education always regret it later. I know this well, and I will prove it to you. One day, you'll weep bitterly for the mistakes you've made, but by then, it will be too late." Pinocchio was frightened. He looked around, trying to find where the voice was coming from. Suddenly, he noticed that the donkey he had been riding was crying, tears streaming down its face, just like a boy. "Hey, Mr. Driver," Pinocchio cried, "this donkey is crying." "Let him cry," the little man replied calmly. "When he gets married, he'll have time to laugh." Pinocchio looked at the donkey sadly. "Have you taught him to speak?" he asked. "No," the little man said. "He learned a few words after living with a group of trained dogs for 3 years." "Poor creature," Pinocchio murmured. "Come on," the little man urged. "Let's not waste time. The night is cool, and we still have a long way to go." Pinocchio climbed back onto the donkey, and the wagon continued its journey. As they neared their destination, Pinocchio was filled with a strange feeling. Something didn't seem right. By dawn the next day, they arrived in the land of toys, a place unlike anything Pinocchio had ever imagined. The streets were full of boys of all ages, making noise and playing games. They were riding bikes, playing marbles, and acting in impromptu circuses. There was laughter and shouting everywhere. Pinocchio, Lampwick, and all the other boys toured the land, joining in every game and entertainment. As the days went by, the boys continued to have fun, and Pinocchio was so happy. He had forgotten about school, studying, and his promise to the fairy. One day, as he met Lampwick again, he said, "Oh, what a beautiful life this is. I never thought it would be this wonderful." Lampwick grinned. "I told you. You didn't want to come, but now look at you. You owe all this happiness to me. If you didn't listen to my advice, you'd still be stuck in school." Pinocchio smiled. "You're right, Lampwick. I'm glad I followed you here. What a life!" For 5 months the boys lived in joy, never studying, never worrying. But one morning, Pinocchio woke up to find a great surprise awaiting him, something that would make him feel very unhappy, as you will see. Chapter 32. Pinocchio's ears become like those of a donkey. In a little while he changes into a real donkey and begins to bray. One morning Pinocchio woke up to find a great surprise awaiting him. When he reached up to feel his head, he was shocked to discover that his ears had grown overnight, at least 10 inches long. Now, from the time Pinocchio was born, he had very small ears, so small that they were almost impossible to see. But now, those tiny ears had transformed into large, donkey-like ears, looking as out of place as could be. He rushed to find a mirror, but not finding one, he looked at his reflection in a basin of water. There, he saw what he had never expected. His once manly figure now had a beautiful pair of donkey's ears sticking out from his head. Pinocchio was horrified. He cried, screamed, and even banged his head against the wall. But the more he screamed, the longer and hairier his ears became. A little dormouse, who lived upstairs, came to check on him. Seeing his distress, she asked, "What's wrong, dear Pinocchio?" "I'm sick, very sick," Pinocchio cried. "Do you know how to feel a pulse?" The dormouse took Pinocchio's wrist and felt it carefully. After a moment she looked up at him sadly and said, "You have a fever, a very bad one." "What fever is it?" Pinocchio asked, starting to panic. "It's the donkey fever," she said solemnly. Pinocchio's heart sank. "What does that mean?" "Well," the dormouse explained, "it means that in a couple of hours you will no longer be a marionette, nor a boy. You'll turn into a real donkey, just like the ones who pull carts to market." "Oh no, what have I done? What have I done?" Pinocchio moaned, grabbing his long donkey ears and pulling at them in desperation. The dormouse sighed. "Don't cry. There's nothing you can do now. The curse is on you because you turned away from studying, from books, and from all things good to chase after play and laziness. All boys who do that eventually turn into donkeys." Pinocchio, sobbing, said, "But the fault isn't mine. It's Lampwick's. He led me astray." "Who is this Lampwick?" the dormouse asked. "He's a classmate of mine. I wanted to go back to studying and be a good boy, but Lampwick kept telling me, 'Why waste time with school? Come with me to the land of toys, where there's no studying, just fun all day long.'" "Why did you listen to him?" the dormouse asked, shaking her head. "I was foolish," Pinocchio cried. "I didn't think of the consequences. If only I had listened to the fairy who loved me so much, I wouldn't be in this mess. I would be a real boy now." Pinocchio looked down, feeling ashamed. "When I see Lampwick again, I'll tell him exactly what I think of him." With those words, Pinocchio went to the door, but then remembered his large donkey ears and turned back. He grabbed a cotton bag from the shelf and pulled it over his head, covering his ears and nose. Out he went, searching for Lampwick. He looked everywhere, on the streets, in the squares, in the theaters, but there was no sign of his friend. Desperate, he returned home and knocked at the door. "Who is it?" came the voice from inside. "It's me, Pinocchio," he replied. "Wait a minute." After a long while, the door finally opened. To Pinocchio's surprise, there stood Lampwick, also wearing a large cotton bag over his head, pulled down to his nose. Pinocchio felt a little relieved, thinking, "My friend must be suffering from the same thing I am. I wonder if he too has donkey fever." Trying not to notice the bag, Pinocchio asked with a smile, "How are you, Lampwick?" "I'm doing great, like a mouse in a Parmesan cheese," Lampwick responded, grinning. "Is that really true?" Pinocchio asked. "Why would I lie?" Lampwick replied. "Well, then why are you wearing that cotton bag over your ears?" Pinocchio asked. "Doctor's orders," Lampwick replied. "One of my knees hurts." "And you, why are you wearing a cotton bag?" "The doctor told me to wear it because I bruised my foot," Pinocchio said quickly. "Oh, poor Pinocchio," Lampwick said sympathetically. "Oh, poor Lampwick," Pinocchio replied. The two of them stood there in an awkward silence, looking at each other. Finally, Pinocchio sweetly asked, "Tell me, Lampwick, have you ever had an earache?" "Never. And you?" "Never. But this morning, my ear's been killing me," Pinocchio said. "Mine too," Lampwick replied. "Really? Which ear is it?" Pinocchio asked. "Both of them. What about you?" "Both of mine too," Pinocchio said. "Could it be the same sickness?" "I think it is," Lampwick replied with a worried look. "Will you do me a favor, Lampwick?" Pinocchio asked. "Of course. Anything. Let me see your ears." Lampwick hesitated. "Okay, but first you show me yours." "No, you show yours first," Pinocchio said firmly. "No, yours first." "All right, let's make a deal," Pinocchio said. "We'll take off our hats together, okay?" "Okay," Lampwick agreed. "Ready? 1, 2, 3. At the count of 3, the two of them pulled off their hats and threw them into the air. And that's when the terrible truth was revealed. Both Pinocchio and Lampwick had donkey ears, long and floppy, just like the ears of the donkeys that had been pulling the wagon. At first, they stood there in shock, but instead of feeling ashamed, the two of them burst into laughter. They laughed and laughed until their sides ached and they were nearly crying. But suddenly, Lampwick stopped laughing. He staggered and almost fell. Pale as a ghost, he turned to Pinocchio and said, "Help! I can't stand up anymore." Pinocchio, who had also been laughing, suddenly stopped. "I can't stand either," he cried, and as they both stumbled around, they felt their arms turning into legs, their faces stretching into snouts and their backs sprouting gray fur. Then, to their horror, they felt their tails grow. They tried to cry, to beg for help, but instead, loud donkey brays escaped their throats. "Ha! Ha! Ha!" At that moment, a knock came at the door, and a voice shouted, "Open up! I am the little man, the driver of the wagon that brought you here. Open or beware." Chapter 33. Pinocchio, having become a donkey, is bought by the owner of a circus, who wants to teach him to do tricks. The donkey becomes lame and is sold to a man who wants to use his skin for a drumhead. Pinocchio and Lampwick stood together, feeling more and more ashamed of themselves. Outside the room, the little man, growing impatient, kicked the door so violently that it flew open. With his usual sweet smile, he looked at the two donkeys and said, "Great job, boys! You brayed so well that I recognized your voices right away. Here I am." Pinocchio and Lampwick, humiliated, lowered their heads, drooped their ears, and tucked their tails between their legs. The little man petted them, smoothing their fur and using a currycomb to make them shine like polished glass. Satisfied with their appearance, he bridled them and took them to the marketplace to sell them. Lampwick was soon bought by a farmer whose donkey had died. Pinocchio, on the other hand, was sold to the owner of a circus who planned to teach him to perform tricks for the audience. You see, the little man's job was not a good one. He was a cunning man who sought out lazy boys, those who hated school and preferred play to work. He took them to the land of toys, where they could enjoy themselves all day long. But when they turned into donkeys, he sold them at the market, making a fortune. Pinocchio had a rough start in his new life. When he arrived at the circus, his new master filled his feeding trough with straw. Pinocchio tasted it, but spat it out. "Don't like the straw, huh?" his master said angrily. "Wait, I'll teach you to eat it." He whipped Pinocchio across the legs. Pinocchio screamed in pain and brayed loudly. "Ha! Ha! Ha! I can't digest straw!" "Then eat the hay," his master ordered. Pinocchio tried the hay, but it didn't sit well either. "Ha, ha, ha, hay gives me a headache," he brayed. "Do you think I should feed you duck or chicken?" the man asked sarcastically, whipping him again. After that second beating, Pinocchio grew quiet, no longer complaining. The stable door was closed, and he was left alone. Hungry, he yawned wide enough to swallow an entire loaf of bread. Still, there was no food but the hay. Pinocchio reluctantly ate it, thinking to himself, "This hay isn't bad, but I wish I were studying instead. I should be eating bread and butter instead of this." The next morning, Pinocchio found the hay was gone. He chewed on the straw, disappointed at how unappetizing it was. He repeated to himself, "Patience, if only my misfortune could teach disobedient boys a lesson." His master came in and shouted, "Patience, indeed. You don't think I brought you here just to feed you, do you? No, you are going to earn me some money. I'm going to teach you to jump, bow, dance, and even stand on your head." Pinocchio didn't have much choice but to obey. It took him 3 long months of practice and many more lashings before he was able to perform the tricks perfectly. The day came when the circus announced a grand performance. The theater was packed with people, excited to see the famous donkey. The posters advertised, "Great spectacle tonight. Leaps and exercises by the great artists and famous horses." First public appearance of the famous donkey, Pinocchio, the star of the dance. When the performance started, the circus manager introduced Pinocchio to the audience, praising him as the greatest donkey ever trained. Pinocchio was dressed in a beautiful bridle, decorated with camellias and colorful ribbons, making him look like a fine animal. He was presented as the star of the show, even though he felt humiliated inside. The manager directed Pinocchio through various tricks, walking, trotting, galloping, and even leaping. But at one point, when he was supposed to jump through a hoop, his hind legs caught in the ring and he fell. The audience cheered and clapped, thinking it was part of the performance. But after the fall, Pinocchio was lame. He could hardly move and had to be helped back to the stable. The next morning, the vet declared he would be lame for the rest of his life. "Well, what do I want with a lame donkey?" said the manager. "Take him to the market and sell him." Pinocchio was sold for 4 cents to a man who wanted to use his tough skin for a drumhead. The man took him to a cliff, tied a stone to his neck, and threw him into the sea to drown. Pinocchio sank to the bottom, facing his tragic fate, as the man waited to retrieve his skin and make a drum. This was a truly sad end for Pinocchio, who had once dreamed of becoming a real boy. Chapter 34. Pinocchio is thrown into the sea, eaten by fishes, and becomes a marionette once more. As he swims to land, he is swallowed by the terrible shark. Down into the sea, Pinocchio sank deeper and deeper. After 50 minutes of waiting, the man who had thrown him into the water began to think that his little donkey must surely be drowned by now. "Well, my poor little donkey must be gone by now," he muttered to himself. "Now I can get to work on my beautiful drum." The man tugged at the rope tied to Pinocchio's leg and pulled with all his strength. To his surprise, instead of pulling up a lifeless donkey, he saw a very much alive marionette squirming like an eel. The man stared at the marionette with his mouth open, stunned. He couldn't believe his eyes. You're not the donkey," he gasped. "I am the donkey," Pinocchio replied, laughing. "You?" the man asked, shocked. "Yep, it's me," said Pinocchio. "Are you making fun of me?" "Making fun of you? Not at all, dear master. I'm being serious." But how did you go from being a donkey to being a wooden marionette?" "It must be the salt water, master. The sea has a way of playing tricks on you." The man was not amused. "Be careful, marionette. Don't laugh at me. If you make fun of me, I'll lose my patience." Pinocchio smiled and said, "Well, master, would you like to hear my story? Untie me, and I'll tell you everything." Curious, the man untied the rope that held Pinocchio's leg, and Pinocchio began his tale. "Once upon a time, I was a wooden marionette just like I am now. I had the chance to become a real boy, but because of my laziness and hatred of books and listening to bad friends, I ran away from home. One day, I woke up to find myself changed into a donkey, long ears, a gray coat, and a tail. It was the most shameful day of my life. I was sold to a circus where they tried to make me dance. I fell and became lame, and that's when you bought me. You tied a stone around my neck and threw me into the sea, hoping to kill me. But when the fishes came to eat me, they realized I was made of wood. After nibbling my ears and my nose, they ran away in disgust." The man, now horrified, said, "I swear I'll never eat fish again." "Don't blame the fishes," Pinocchio replied. "They only thought I was a real donkey. But when they tasted my wooden body, they quickly gave up." Pinocchio continued, "After that, I swam away, and here I am. So now you see, I'm no longer a donkey. I'm a marionette once again." The man, still angry, said, "I bought you for 4 cents, and you've cost me enough trouble already. I'll sell you again, maybe as firewood." "Go ahead," Pinocchio replied, "but if you need a drumhead, remember me." With that, he took a leap and dived into the sea, swimming quickly away from the man, shouting, "Goodbye. If you ever need firewood or a drumhead, don't forget me." As Pinocchio swam away, he saw a large white rock in the distance, with a little goat standing on top, calling out to him. The goat had a brilliant azure coat, the same color as the fairy's hair. Pinocchio's heart raced, and he swam faster toward the rock. But just as he was halfway there, a massive sea creature appeared. It was the terrible shark, a monster so terrifying it had been nicknamed the Attila of the sea. Pinocchio, terrified, tried to swim away, but the shark's enormous mouth opened wide, and the sound of its teeth snapping was enough to freeze anyone's blood. "Hurry, Pinocchio!" the little goat called from the rock. "The monster is coming!" Pinocchio swam desperately, but the shark was gaining on him. "Faster, faster, or you'll be caught!" the goat cried. Pinocchio pushed himself harder and harder, but before he could reach the rock, the shark's mouth snapped shut around him. In one gulp, Pinocchio was swallowed whole. Inside the shark, it was dark, and Pinocchio couldn't see anything. For a moment, he thought he had fallen into an inkwell. As he tried to get his bearings, he realized that the cold wind he felt was coming from the shark's lungs, as the creature had asthma and breathed heavily. Pinocchio, frightened, cried out, "Help! Someone help me!" A rough voice answered, "Who's there, unhappy boy?" Pinocchio, startled, asked, "Who is that?" "It's me," the voice replied. "I'm a poor tunny, swallowed by the shark the same way you were." "A fish?" Pinocchio asked. "I'm no fish," said the tunny. "I'm a poor trapped soul just like you." Pinocchio, still panicked, replied, "I didn't choose to be swallowed. The shark chased me and ate me without asking." "What do we do now?" asked the tunny. Wait until the shark digests us, I suppose. I don't want to be digested, Pinocchio cried. Neither do I, said the tunny, but I suppose it's more dignified to die under the water than to end up in a frying pan. Ridiculous, Pinocchio scoffed. The tunny replied, I believe it's better to respect opinions, even if they seem strange. Pinocchio, determined, replied, I want to get out of here. I'll find a way. As they spoke, Pinocchio saw a faint light in the distance. What's that? He asked. It's another poor fish, said the tunny, waiting like us to be digested by the shark. I want to see who it is. Maybe they know a way out. Good luck, said the tunny. I hope you find your way. Pinocchio swam toward the light, determined to find a way out, but the shark's massive body was nearly a mile long. As the light grew closer, Pinocchio realized that escape was more difficult than ever. The battle for survival in the shark's belly had just begun. Chapter 35. In the shark's body, Pinocchio finds whom? Read this chapter, my children, and you will know. Pinocchio, after saying goodbye to his friend the tunny, ventured off into the dark of the shark's stomach, trying to walk as best as he could toward the faint light he saw ahead. As he moved, his feet splashed in slippery, greasy water, and the smell of fried fish was so strong that he felt as though it was the season of Lent. The light grew brighter and clearer the further he walked, and eventually he found something quite surprising. He discovered a small table set for dinner, illuminated by a candle stuck in a glass bottle. Sitting next to the table was a little old man, white as snow, eating live fish that squirmed so much that some slipped out of his mouth and escaped under the table. At this sight, Pinocchio was overwhelmed with happiness, so much so that he almost fainted. He wanted to laugh, cry, and say 1,000 things, but all he could do was stand there, stuttering. Finally, with a burst of joy, he ran over to the old man and threw his arms around his neck. "Oh, father, dear father, have I found you at last? Now I shall never, never leave you again," he cried. The old man rubbed his eyes in disbelief and asked, "Are my eyes playing tricks on me? Are you really my dear Pinocchio?" Yes, it's me. Look at me. You've forgiven me, haven't you? Oh, my dear father, how good you are. And to think that Pinocchio went on, recounting all his misfortunes. On the day you sold your coat to buy me my ABC book, I ran away to the Marionette Theater, was caught, and nearly burned. I met the fox and the cat, was robbed, and later met the assassins who hanged me. The fairy rescued me, but I lied, and my nose grew. I got into more trouble with the fox and the cat in the Field of Wonders, and then I was imprisoned. After being freed, I worked as a watchdog, was later freed, only to be tricked again. I ended up crying over the fairy's grave, but the pigeon told me you were building a boat to find me. And then I saw you drowning and waved from the shore. The old man interrupted. I knew you too, my Pinocchio, but I could not reach you. The sea was rough, and the waves overturned my boat. Then the terrible shark came and swallowed me. Pinocchio, astonished, asked, And how long have you been inside the shark? 2 long years, said Geppetto. 2 years that felt like centuries. Father, how have you lived? Where did you find the candle and the matches? Geppetto explained, A ship sank near me during a storm. The shark who had swallowed my boat had swallowed most of that ship too. The sailors were saved, but the ship's cargo, food, candles, and matches, was left inside the shark. Thanks to those supplies, I've lived well, but now I have nothing left. This candle is the last one I have. Pinocchio, determined, said, Then we must escape. We cannot stay here any longer. How? Geppetto asked. We'll run out of the shark's mouth and dive into the sea. But I can't swim, my dear boy, Geppetto replied. Don't worry, I'm a good swimmer. I'll carry you on my shoulders." Geppetto smiled sadly, shaking his head. "But how could a small marionette like you carry me?" "Try it, father. If we must die, we'll die together," Pinocchio said, taking Geppetto's hand. Pinocchio led the way, holding the candle to light the path. They climbed up the shark's throat and made their way toward the mouth. Pinocchio warned, "Be careful not to tickle the shark's tongue. It might wake up." As they reached the mouth, they prepared to leap into the sea, but the shark suddenly sneezed, throwing them back into its stomach, and the candle went out. Pinocchio, undeterred, said, "We'll try again, father. Follow me, and we'll make it this time." Pinocchio and Geppetto climbed up the shark's throat once more, crossed the wide tongue, and jumped over the rows of teeth. At the last moment, Pinocchio said, "Father, get on my back and hold tight. I'll get us out." Once Geppetto was on his shoulders, Pinocchio dived into the water and swam with all his might. The sea was calm, and the moon shone brightly, while the shark remained fast asleep, unaware of their escape. Chapter 36. Pinocchio finally stops being a puppet and becomes a real boy. "My dear father, we are saved!" shouted Pinocchio. "We just need to reach the shore, and that is easy." Pinocchio swam quickly, trying to get to land. He saw that Geppetto was shaking like he had a fever. Was he shaking because he was scared or cold? Maybe both. Pinocchio thought his father was scared and tried to make him feel better. "Don't worry, father. We will be safe on land soon." "But where is the shore?" asked Geppetto, looking around. "I can only see sea and sky." "I can see the shore," said Pinocchio. "Remember, father, I can see better in the dark than in the day." Pinocchio tried to stay calm, but he was feeling tired and weak. He was out of breath and thought he could not swim much longer. He swam a little more. Then he turned to his father and weakly said, "Help me, father. I'm so tired." Pinocchio and Geppetto were about to drown when they heard a voice from the sea. "What's wrong?" "It's me, Pinocchio, and my father." "I know your voice. You are Pinocchio." "That's right. Who are you?" "I am the tuna. I was with you in the shark's stomach." "How did you escape?" "I did what you did. I followed you." "Thank you, tuna. Please help us. We will drown if you don't." "I will help. Hold on to my tail, and I will take you to the shore." Pinocchio and Geppetto held on to the tuna. They climbed onto his back instead of holding his tail. "Are we too heavy?" asked Pinocchio. "Not at all. You are as light as shells," said the tuna. When they reached the shore, Pinocchio quickly helped Geppetto onto land. Then he said to the tuna, "Thank you, dear friend. You saved my father. I don't know how to thank you enough." The tuna came out of the water, and Pinocchio kissed his cheek. The tuna was so surprised, he swam away quickly. The sun came up. Pinocchio helped Geppetto, who was very weak, and said, "Lean on me, father. Let's go slowly. If we get tired, we can rest." "And where are we going?" asked Geppetto. "We need to find a place where we can get some food and sleep." They walked a short way and saw two poor-looking people sitting on a stone, begging for food. It was the fox and the cat, but they looked very different. The cat had really lost his sight, and the fox had lost his tail and was very old. "Oh, Pinocchio," cried the fox, "please give us something to eat. We are old and sick." "You are sick?" asked the cat. "Goodbye, bad friends," said Pinocchio. "You tricked me before, but you will never trick me again." "Please, we are really poor and hungry," begged the fox. "If you are poor, it's because you deserve it," Pinocchio said. "Remember, stolen money never brings good things. Goodbye." "Have mercy on us," cried the cat. "Goodbye, bad friends. Bad wheat makes bad bread," said Pinocchio. Pinocchio and Geppetto walked away. After a while they found a small house made of straw. "Someone must live there," said Pinocchio. "Let's see." They knocked on the door. "Who is it?" asked a voice. "We are poor and hungry," said Pinocchio. "Turn the key and the door will open," said the voice. Pinocchio opened the door and they went inside. They looked around, but no one was there. "Where is the owner of the house?" asked Pinocchio. "Here I am, up here," came the voice. Pinocchio and Geppetto looked up and saw the talking cricket sitting on a beam. "Hello, dear cricket," said Pinocchio. "Now you call me your friend, but do you remember when you threw a hammer at me?" asked the cricket. "You're right, dear cricket. I'm sorry, I deserve it. But please, don't hurt my father." "I won't hurt either of you," said the cricket. "I just wanted to remind you that we should always be kind to others." "You are right. I will never forget your lesson," said Pinocchio. The cricket explained that a little goat with blue hair had given him the house. "Where did the goat go?" asked Pinocchio. "I don't know," said the cricket. "Did she say anything about me?" asked Pinocchio. "She said, 'Poor Pinocchio, he must be dead by now.'" "That was my dear fairy," cried Pinocchio, crying. Pinocchio made a bed of straw for Geppetto, who was still very weak, and asked the cricket, "Where can I find some milk for my father?" "There is a farmer named John who has cows. He lives 3 fields away. He will help you." Pinocchio ran to the farm and asked for milk. The farmer said it would cost a penny. "I don't have a penny," said Pinocchio sadly. "Then you can help me first," said the farmer. "Draw 100 buckets of water from the well, and I will give you milk." Pinocchio worked very hard, pulling up the water, but after a long time, he was very tired. "Before, my donkey did this work," said the farmer, "but he is too sick now." Pinocchio asked to see the donkey. When he did, he saw that it was his old friend, Lampwick, who had died. Pinocchio was very sad. He remembered that Lampwick had been his friend. He took the milk and returned to Geppetto. Pinocchio worked hard every day for his father. He made baskets and sold them to buy food. He also built a rolling chair for Geppetto so he could go outside. Pinocchio studied hard every night. Soon he could read and write. One day, Pinocchio saved 50 pennies. He wanted to buy new clothes. He went to the market, but on the way he met a snail. The snail told him that the fairy was sick in a hospital and had no money. Pinocchio gave the snail all of his money to help the fairy. Pinocchio went home, but when his father asked about the new clothes, he said he couldn't find any. That night, instead of sleeping, Pinocchio worked hard, making baskets to earn more money for the fairy. The next morning, Pinocchio woke up and looked at himself. He was no longer a puppet, but a real boy. He ran to find Geppetto, who had also changed. They were both happy. Pinocchio said, "I'm so happy to be a real boy. Thank you, Father."